Chapter 691. Pang Wanhai was a little dissatisfied with sect master Xiong Tai Shan's previous arrangement. For a cultivator like him who had spent his entire life cultivating the saber technique, what he yearned for the most was to be able to have a great battle with a powerhouse of equal strength. It would be best if it was a powerhouse who had also cultivated the saber technique. Such a life-and-death battle might be able to bring his saber technique to the next level. In the entire Feng province, Ying was undoubtedly the best candidate. When they planned to ambush Ying, Pang Wanhai took the initiative to volunteer, but was rejected by Xiong Tai Shan. Of course, he knew why Xiong Tai Shan rejected him. He was afraid that he would gain something from fighting Yi Ying. Moreover, in Xiong Tai Shan's opinion, a secret technique like the Tyrant Saber art must have been kept by Yi Ying. Pang Wanhai was interested in the Tyrant Saber art, and so was Xiong Tai Shan. Whoever could kill Yi Ying would have the opportunity to obtain the secret technique. Xiong Tai Shan was the sect master, and Pang Wanhai was only the vice sect master. Although Pang Wanhai was dissatisfied with the sect master's words, he could only obey. But the result was that the secret technique of the Tyrant Saber art was not carried by Yi Ying. Instead, it was left in the Tyrant Saber manner and eventually fell into Pang Wanhai's hands. This was also the reason why Pang Wanhai had been staying in the Tyrant Saber manor for the past few days and did not return to the Divine Will sect. If he returned, he would definitely lose the secret technique. He wanted to study it for a few more days. By chance, he had obtained the secret technique, but it was a pity that he could not fight with a saber master like Yi Ying. But he did not expect that in addition to Yi Ying, the sixth son of the Tyrant Saber manor was also so strong. This made him feel happy. Seeing Yi Xiong defeated, Pang Wanhai raised his saber and pointed, his fighting spirit bursting. "Little brat, take 3 slashes and I'll spare your life." After seeing Lu Ye's strength with his own eyes, Pang Wanhai was not arrogant enough to think that he could kill him with 3 slashes. But Lu Yi had just fought a great battle and was injured. It was clear how much of his strength he could use, which gave him full confidence. Moreover, even if he did not die after taking 3 slashes, so what? It would be too naive of him to believe what he said. If a casual sentence could make his opponent believe it, then Yi Lu was not a threat at all. He had not used his killing move, but his verbal attack. As soon as he finished speaking, Pang Wanhai leapt forward, his spirit chi surging, his 9th order Cloud River realm cultivation clearly displayed. Then he saw Lu Yi suddenly float backwards. A small flag had appeared in his hand at some point, and he gently waved it. Pang Wanhai's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately sensed that something was wrong. By the time he wanted to retreat, it was already too late. A layer of light that was visible to the naked eye suddenly appeared out of thin air, like a transparent bowl that covered him completely. Formation! Pang Wanhai's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Yi Lu could actually set up a formation? Furthermore, it was obvious that he had come prepared. Oh no, when Lu Yi was waiting here, he wasn't just doing nothing. Although he was quite strong now, he wouldn't underestimate the strength of his enemies. While waiting, he had already set up many formations in the small courtyard. Yi Xiong and Pang Wanhai, these 2 weapon cultivators, knew nothing about arrays, so they didn't notice anything strange around them. When fighting Yi Xiong, Lu Yi didn't activate the power of the array because Yi Xiong didn't pose much of a threat to him. At this moment, it was perfect to deal with Pang Wanhai. Although he also wanted to fight a 9th order cultivator to test his current strength, this was obviously not a good time. Using the array to deal with him was the best choice. Pang Wanhai's reaction was extremely fast. When he realized that something was wrong, he wanted to escape, but the array had already been set up. Even if he was a 9th order cultivator, there was no way he could directly rush out of the range of the array. He slammed into the transparent light curtain, causing it to ripple. The array flag in Lu Ye's hand suddenly waved down. In the next moment, many killing arrays erupted inside the light curtain. For a moment, lightning bolts swam like snakes, golden arcs of lightning raged, and pillars of fire erupted like dragons. The spirit energy in the area was chaotic, and the momentum was terrifying. Finally, with a violent explosion, a huge flame soared into the sky. Before the trip to the 100 Array Tower, Lu Yi couldn't arrange such a compound spirit array. At the very least, there was no way to embed so many spirit arrays in such a small area. However, the trip to the 100-array tower had greatly increased his attainments in the Tao of arrays, so it wasn't difficult for him to do this. The powerful impact caused the light curtain of the array to collapse. Amidst the soaring flames, a figure suddenly dashed out and fled without looking back. It was Pang Wanhai. In such a small space, he had withstood the power of so many killing arrays and had not died yet. However, compared to his majestic appearance, he could be said to be in an extremely sorry state at this moment. His clothes were ragged, his face was pitch black, and his body was covered in countless injuries. Blood was flowing out, and even his 9th-order Cloud River Realm aura was extremely weak. With such injuries, although he wasn't dead, he was still seriously injured. There was only one thought surging in his mind. This smelly brat doesn't care about martial ethics. Shouldn't a dignified weapon cultivator fight in close combat with the enemy? Why is he playing with spirit arrays? Is this something a weapon cultivator should play with? Weapon cultivators were known for their stubbornness. Such an existence had nothing to do with spirit arrays. He had never heard of the Yi family's 6th brother being proficient in the Tao of arrays. Run! Pang Wanhai hurriedly fled this place. In his current state, it was not suitable for him to fight. Although he was seriously injured, Pang Wanhai's heart was filled with only resentment, not fear. With his speed, a 6th-order cultivator would never be able to catch up to him. As long as he survived this disaster, he would repay this humiliation 1,000 times over. Just as he was thinking this though, he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine as he perceived a sharp aura approaching him at an extremely fast speed. Pang Wanhai turned his head and his pupils shrank. How is this possible? How can this 6th Master Yi be so fast? Also, what's with that pair of fiery red wings? Before Pang Wanhai could figure out what was going on, a bright saber light spread out in his field of vision. Pang Wanhai grit his teeth and turned around to raise his saber. In a violent collision, Lu Ye's pursuing figure paused slightly while Pang Wanhai's body fell like a meteor from the sky. Lu Ye's wings flapped behind him and followed him like a shadow. I'm determined to kill him. After a short while, Lu Yi walked out of the ruins, gently swinging the mountain saber in his hand before sheathing it. Behind him, Pang Wanhai was half kneeling on the ground, his eyes still filled with shock and disbelief. The aura on his body had completely dissipated. He had never imagined that he would die here. Not long ago, he had been excitedly comprehending the tyrant saber technique. In a small courtyard, inside a protective array, a young girl with a figure somewhat similar to Yi Luli stood. Although her face was pale, her eyes were bright. Thanks to the protective array, the aftermath of the previous battle had not hurt her. Even if the house she was in collapsed, it was blocked by the protective array's light curtain. She had never cultivated before, so she did not know how dangerous the previous battle had been, but she had seen Lu Yi beat Yi Xiong like a dead dog and saw the majestic Pang Wanhai flee, his fate unknown. It turns out that the 6th young master is so powerful. The thick dark clouds in the sky dispersed and the bright moonlight poured down, just like the young girl's mood at the moment. No one would bully her again. The battle here had erupted suddenly and ended quickly. The battle between Lu Yi and Yi Xiong had only lasted for 20 breaths of time, and Pang Wanhai had been killed in about the same time. Therefore, only now did the other cultivators in the villa hear the commotion and come over. They looked up and saw Pang Wanhai's kneeling corpse and Yi Xiong, who was lying on the ground like a dead dog, his essence, qi, and spirit drained, as if he had suddenly aged many years. They also saw a figure that should not have appeared here. 6th young master. Someone murmured. These cultivators who had rushed over could be considered the disciples of the Tyrant Saber Villa. Although the Tyrant Saber Villa was a family-like force, the Yi family alone could not support such a huge family business, so Yi Ying and Yi Xiong had taken in many disciples over the years. When the Tyrant Saber Villa had been breached, many people had died in battle, some had fled, and many had survived. Those who remained in the Tyrant Saber Villa were basically those who obeyed Yi Xiong. However, although these people had cultivation, only a few of them were in the Cloud River realm, and their cultivation was not high. At this moment, These disciples who had rushed over looked at Lu Yi and Yi Xiong lying on the ground with complicated expressions. When the Tyrant Saber Villa had been breached, many of them did not know what had happened. Only when the dust had settled did they realize something. In any case, colluding with outsiders was not something to be proud of. In these few days, many of the surviving disciples had been suffering in their hearts, and only felt that the road ahead was bleak. The fact that something like this had happened tonight made them feel even more confused. "Kill him." A weak voice sounded. It was Yi Xiong lying on the ground. "Kill him quickly." Yi Xiong had used all his strength to wield the tyrant saber. At this moment he was truly a lamp without oil. Pang Wanhai, who he had relied on, was also dead. If he wanted to live, he could only rely on these disciples. Although these disciples were not outstanding, if they swarmed together, they might have a chance. No one moved. Not to mention that Pang Wanhai's death had shocked them greatly. Lu Ye's identity as the sixth young master made them unable to do anything. After a while, a disciple clasped his fists and bowed to Lu Yi. "Sixth young master, take care." Saying so, he turned around and left. Attacking Lu Yi was absolutely impossible, but it was not good for him to stay. After thinking about it, he decided to leave. After the Tyrant Saber Villa had experienced such an incident, it was hard to say whether the Tyrant Saber Villa would still exist in the Feng province in the future. Some people took the lead while others followed. The hesitant disciples saw that Lu Yi did not have the slightest intention to persuade them to stay. They knew that even if they stayed, they would not be welcomed in the future, so they all left. In a moment, the cultivators who had come here had all left. Only Yi Xiong's unwilling and powerless roar echoed in the night sky. To be continued. Chapter 692. Lu Yi stepped forward, looking down at Yi Xiong from above. Dan Mo's eyes finally made Yi Xiong panic. "Yi Lu, I'm your second uncle. You can't kill me. You're still young. You don't want to live with the crime of killing your own family, do you?" Yi Xiong struggled to speak. Even at this time, he still had the instinct to live. The only response he got was a flash of blade light. "Yi Lu's second uncle was related to me, Lu Yi." Yi Xiong died. His eyes widened, as if he didn't expect his nephew to act so decisively. In the middle of the night, the tyrannical Saber Manor was in chaos. The news of Pang Wanhai and Yi Xiong's death spread quickly. The remaining disciples left one after another. Yi Xiong's wives and concubines also scattered, afraid that Lu Yi would come and kill them. Lu Yi was not in the mood. Although he had to act according to Yi Lu's identity, killing Yi Xiong and Yi Lang was enough. As for Yi Xiong's wives and concubines, most of them were ordinary people who had never cultivated. A few of them were cultivators, but their cultivation was not very high. Lu Yi came in front of the girl and removed the protective array. He said, "You should go too. Live a good life. If there's anything you like in the manor, just take it." After today, the tyrannical Saber Manor would no longer exist in Feng province. Lu Yi didn't care much about the properties in the manor. Those things were useful to ordinary people, but not to cultivators. The girl knelt in front of Lu Yi and kowtowed 3 times, then hurriedly left. Lu Yi raised his hand and touched the battlefield imprint, sending a message to. The sky was getting brighter. Lu Yi was the only one left in the manor. In the center of the Saber Lake, there was a small island with a few simple wooden houses. In front of the houses was a field of green bamboo. Compared to the solemn atmosphere of the tyrannical Saber Manor, it seemed out of place. Lu Yi moved a chair and sat in front of a wooden house, playing with a black stone in his hand. His eyes flashed with contemplation. Even with his vision, he couldn't tell what this black stone was made of. It was the secret inheritance of the tyrannical saber art. It was an opportunity that Ying had obtained in his early years. Lu Yi didn't expect to get it so easily. The main reason why he came to the tyrannical saber villa to take revenge was because of the tyrannical saber art. However, he didn't have much hope because Yi Xiong had colluded with the Divine Will sect. If there was anything good, it would have been taken away by the Divine Will sect, especially the secret inheritance of the tyrannical saber art. It was impossible to leave it in the tyrannical saber villa. He had originally thought that he would only have a chance to retrieve the secret manual after he had dealt with the Divine Will sect. Unexpectedly, he actually found this item in Pang Wanhai's storage pouch. This was truly an unexpected surprise. How could he have known that this secret manual was also an unexpected surprise for Pang Wanhai? The reason he had stayed at the Domineering Saber Manor instead of returning to the Divine Will sect was because he wanted to comprehend the Domineering Saber art for a few more days. But in the end, he had lost his life. It could only be said that there was bound to be something in life, and there was no need to force it. This secret manual was not the only thing he had gained. Ying had established the Tyrannical Saber Villa many years ago and had collected many things about the saber art. Among them, there was no lack of the insights of masters. They were all placed in the library of the Tyrannical Saber Villa. Now, they were all in Lu Ye's storage pouch. He had casually checked before and found that his gains were much more abundant than he had imagined. This world was limited by the heavens and earth. The upper limit of a cultivator's cultivation was the Cloud River realm. However, it was also because of this reason that cultivators would shift the focus of their cultivation to polishing their skills when they could no longer improve their cultivation. This led to a phenomenon. The Cloud River realm cultivators of this world were generally stronger than the cultivators of the 9 continents in terms of fighting skills. This was especially true for the Cloud River realm 9th order cultivators. No one knew what kind of foundation they had unless it was a life or death battle. Pang Wanhai's death was actually a little sullen. He had judged Lu Ye's ability based on his inherent knowledge, but in the end, he had been defeated by the spirit array that Lu Yi had set up in advance. Who would have thought that a weapon cultivator who used the saber would also be proficient in spirit arrays? If it had really been a life or death battle, it would have been a bitter one. The things in the library were not only the saber art insights of Cloud River realm cultivators. In the early years of the Soaring Dragon realm, there were Spirit Sea realm cultivators. Although hundreds of years had passed, many things were still passed down. The secret manual of the Tyrannical Saber art, the gains in the library. Just these things alone made this trip worthwhile for Lu Yi. And these things were all things that he longed for in the 9 continents but could not obtain. In the sky, a stream of light pierced through the air and soon landed in front of him, revealing 2 figures with similar figures. It was Yi and Yi Lioli. Last night, after dealing with Yi Xiong, Lu Yi sent a message to. However, Yi Lioli was still unconscious at that time, so Yi did not disturb her. It was not until Yi Lioli woke up that Yi brought her over. After a night of rest, Yi Lioli's spirit had recovered a lot. 6th brother. Yi Lioli called out softly and looked around. She had built the wooden house on the island with her own hands. It was also her favorite place. In the entire Tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa, except for her, no one could come here. It was a familiar place, a familiar scenery, but many familiar figures were no longer there. The little girl was secretly sad. Yi Xiong is dead. There was also a 9th order cultivator from the Divine Will sect. I don't know his name, but I killed them all, Lu Yi said. Yi Lioli did not know how her 6th brother did such a thing, but the death of her enemies was undoubtedly something to be happy about. The little girl's nose twitched, her eyes reddened, and tears rolled down her cheeks. The culprit this time was Yi Xiong. He was the one who leaked Yi, our father's whereabouts, and attracted the Divine Will sect to surround and kill him. Lu Ye's current identity was 6th brother Yi, but when he called someone else father, Lu Yi still could not breathe properly. Rest well first. I'll think of a way to get revenge later. Yi Lioli shook her head, tears streaming down her face. It's enough, 6th brother. All her family members were dead, and only 6th brother was left. The main culprit had been executed, and her revenge had been avenged. She didn't want to see 6th brother go up against the Divine Will sect again. If something were to happen to 6th brother, then she would really be all alone. Lu Yi naturally did not care. He had already gotten what he wanted, and since Yi Lioli said so, he just went along with it, nodding lightly. Rest first. You haven't rested well these past few days. Although he said so, Lu Yi knew that even if he did not go to the Divine Will sect, they would still come looking for him. After all, Pang Wanhai had died here. The death of a 9th order cultivator was a huge blow to the Divine Will sect. No matter what, the Divine Will sect would respond. Unless he took Yi Lioli away from Feng province and left the scope of the Divine Will sect's influence. But right now, he was eager to comprehend his gains, so how could he be willing to run around and tire himself? The Divine Will sect was strong. If he took the initiative to attack them, he might not have a chance of winning, but if they dared to come, he would not have a good ending. Array cultivators were best at defending against enemies. As long as they were given enough time and space, they could form an army by themselves. Yi Lioli obeyed his instructions and went to rest in a wooden house. Lu Yi asked Yi to stay behind and look after her, while he began to arrange a large spirit array around the island. In the Cloud River battlefield, he was targeted by the myriad demon ridge side, but he was still safe and sound. No matter how strong the Divine Will sect was, it was not stronger than a large camp. While he was busy here, the Divine Will sect received some news. Many people left the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa that day, so all kinds of news naturally spread. The changes in the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa had already attracted the attention of the Feng province's cultivation world. After all, the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa was a big force. What happened after that was even more shocking. Sixth young Master Yi went back to the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa alone, killed Yi Xiong and Pang Wanhai, and avenged the blood feud with his own strength. If not for the fact that more than one person spread the news, no one would have believed it. Yi Xiong was only an 8th order cultivator, but who was Pang Wanhai? He was the Divine Will sect's vice sect master, a 9th order cultivator, while Yi Lu was only a 6th order cultivator. How could he kill those two? No one knew the specific details of the battle, but the result was there, so people had no choice but to believe it. Unlike the cultivators who took it as idle gossip, the Divine Will sect's reaction was much more intense. The vice sect master died in the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa. Even if it was rumored that Yi Lu had the ability to kill a 9th order cultivator, the Divine Will sect would not let it go so easily. Over the past few days, many Divine Will sect cultivators were ordered to sneak into the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa to find out what happened. However, the entire tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa was like a bottomless abyss, and all the cultivators who entered were missing. Even an 8th order elder of the Divine Will sect was among them. This time, the Divine Will sect was a little shocked. They secretly speculated that there might be some mysterious master behind Yi Lu. Otherwise, how could a 6th order cultivator do such a thing? Perhaps the one who killed Yi Xiong and Pang Wanhai was also the mysterious master hiding behind Yi Lu? After losing some people, the Divine Will sect did not dare to act rashly. They only left some people to monitor the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa from afar. The unknown was the most terrifying enemy. The Divine Will sect dared to attack Yi Ying and the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa because the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa's full strength was in the open. But now, the entire tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa seemed to be wrapped in a layer of fog. Who would dare to act rashly before finding out the truth? This saved Lu Yi a lot of trouble. The reason why the Divine Will sect cultivators who sneaked in were nowhere to be found was because they had fallen into the spirit array. No one in the entire Soaring Dragon realm would be able to see through the formation he had set up. Those who fell into the formation would not have a good ending, not to mention the disciples of the Divine Will sect. Even the sect master of the Divine Will sect would not be able to see through it. In the past few days, he was not in a hurry to cultivate the tyrannical saber art, nor did he comprehend the many saber techniques he had obtained from the library. He had been meditating calmly to relieve the pressure on his soul. To be continued. Chapter 693. The gift he had received from the 100 Formation Pagoda was simply too great. After leaving the pagoda, his spirit had been constantly under immense pressure. He had originally planned to find a secluded place after leaving the 100 Formation Pagoda, or go into seclusion at the Tianji Business Alliance. He had not expected to suddenly come to the Soaring Dragon realm. After that, he was hunted down, and then came to the tyrannical Saber Mountain Manor to seek revenge. Only now did he barely manage to settle down. The gift from the 100 Formation Pagoda was not so easy to digest. The gift he had received from the 100 Formation Pagoda in the Sky Expanse sect had taken 1 or 2 years to digest. The gift he had received from the 100 Formation Pagoda in the Cloudy River battlefield was more than 10 times greater than the previous one. However, it would not take 10 times longer. Firstly, Lu Ye's spirit was now much stronger than before. Secondly, his cultivation in the Tao of formations could not be mentioned in the same breath as before. However, it was still not something that could be completed in a short period of time. Lu Yi did not need to digest the entire gift. He only needed to digest a part of it so that his spirit would not be so pressured. He rarely meditated like this. Occasionally he would try it out. It was a different experience. 5 days later, in the wooden house he was staying in, Lu Yi slowly opened his eyes. There was a faint glimmer in his eyes. After 5 days of comprehension and sorting out, the pressure on his spirit no longer existed. However, the more he comprehended, the more he could feel the vastness of the gift. After his trip to the Sky Expanse sect, Lu Yi had been curious about one thing. Who had created the 100 Formation Pagoda? Why did it have such a miraculous effect? How was it divided into 3 parts? Such a treasure would definitely exceed the knowledge of the cultivation world of the 9 prefectures. If it was in its complete state, what would it be like? It was a pity that there were only 2 parts of the 100 Formation Pagoda in the cultivation world of the 9 prefectures. The location of the 3rd part was unknown. There were many unrecognized secrets in the cultivation world of the 9 prefectures. Not to mention Lu Yi, who was only at the Cloud River tier. Could even those at the Divine Sea tier know everything? Perhaps even they could not see the truth of the 100 Formation Pagoda. The pressure on his soul had been relieved for the time being, but it would take some time for him to completely digest the enormous gift. This matter could not be rushed, and he would slowly digest it when he had the time in the future. Lu Yi had a faint feeling that if he could digest all the benefits he had obtained this time, then his attainments in Array Tao might not be the best in the world, but at least in the entire 9 regions, he would be at the top. This wasn't him being arrogant, but he was certain of one thing. There had never been an array cultivator in the 9 continents who had obtained such great benefits from the 100 Formation Pagoda like him. But then again, although the 100 Formation Pagoda's gift could greatly increase Lu Ye's attainments in Array Tao in a short period of time, it was still a kind of enlightenment that did not belong to him. If there was a day when he could obtain the pagoda and transcend the pagoda, then he would be able to walk his own path. Of course, that was a matter for a long time to come. Lu Yi only had a vague idea of what to do in the near future. For now, he wasn't qualified to do so. Only after the pressure on his soul had been relieved did Lu Yi take out the unknown black stone from his storage space. The black stone was the size of an egg and completely black. At first glance, it looked inconspicuous, but upon closer inspection, one would realize that the black stone was like a black hole that could even swallow one's sight. The secret inheritance of the tyrannical saber art. It was impossible to verify where Ying had obtained the black stone. There were only rumors that he had obtained it from an ancient ruin. It was also because of this black stone that Yi Ying had created the tyrannical saber art and the tyrannical saber mountain villa. It could be said that this small black stone was the root of the tyrannical saber mountain villa. The tyrannical saber mountain villa had indeed been destroyed, and there would be no tyrannical saber mountain villa in the future. However, as long as this black stone existed, the tyrannical saber art would not be lost. Lu Yi stared at the black stone. Even with his powerful soul, he was slightly shaken. Faintly, he felt as if his entire body was about to be sucked into the darkness. He urged his spiritual energy and poured it into the black stone. In an instant, the small black stone seemed to have become a bottomless pit, constantly swallowing Lu Ye's spiritual energy. The darkness on the surface of the black stone became deeper and deeper, as if it was about to materialize and flow out of the stone. Until a certain moment, a black fog visible to the naked eye surged out. The black fog seemed to have a mind of its own as it rolled back and wrapped around Lu Yi. Lu Yi did not panic. When he had killed Pang Wanhai and waited here for Yi and Yilioli, he had urged this black stone, so he knew that this was a normal phenomenon. Wrapped in the black fog, Lu Yi instantly lost all perception of his surroundings, as if he had entered another world. This world was gray and hazy. As far as the eye could see, 3 indistinct figures could be seen in front of him. Although the faces of the figures could not be seen clearly, judging from the outlines, these three figures should be the same person. However, they corresponded to the three states of a person's life. The figure on the left was full of vitality and high spirits. The figure in the middle was mature and steady, like a mountain. The figure on the right had a long beard that reached his chest. Although his figure was slightly stooped, his aura was as deep as the sea and as vast as the starry sky. Youth, middle-aged, old. Lu Yi vaguely guessed that this should be the mark left by the creator of the tyrant saber art in the black stone to pass on his saber art. Each figure corresponded to a move of the tyrant saber. 3 figures meant that the tyrant saber had 3 moves. This was undoubtedly an extremely brilliant method of inheritance. Compared to using jade slips or books to record, it was much more intuitive. However, this method was not something that just anyone could do. At the very least, Lu Yi had never heard of any Divine Sea Realm cultivator in the 9 provinces who could do this. Perhaps he was ignorant, or perhaps this was not a Divine Sea Realm cultivator's method. The last time Lu Yi came here, he had stimulated the figure of the youth on the far left. However, in just 3 breaths, he had retreated from here. This time, he suddenly had the idea to try the other 2 figures. As for how to stimulate them, it was not a troublesome matter. After all, this was only an inheritance. The spiritual energy he poured into the black stone was the key to opening this inheritance. However, just as Lu Yi was about to do so, a cold feeling suddenly swept through his body. It was as if an invisible beast had stretched out its tongue and licked his divine soul. Lu Yi suddenly froze, and a trace of understanding appeared in the depths of his heart. With his current strength, he could not rashly stimulate the figures of the middle-aged and the old man. Otherwise, he would really die here. A strong divine soul not only gave birth to a strong perception, but also a premonition of danger. Lu Yi suddenly understood. No wonder even Ying had never used the 2nd and 3rd moves of the Tyrant Saber. The world only knew that he did not need to use these 2 moves against enemies, but in fact he had never cultivated them. Because Lu Yi was sure that with Yi Ying's foundation, it was not enough to stimulate the figures of the middle-aged and the old man, unless he wanted to die. This made Lu Yi laugh involuntarily. However, this also proved the greatness of the Tyrant Saber from another perspective. With just 1 move of the Tyrant Saber, Ying had such an achievement. If he could really learn the 2nd and 3rd moves, he would be invincible in the entire Soaring Dragon realm. Since he could not rashly stimulate the figures of the middle-aged and the old man, Lu Yi once again turned his gaze to the figure of the youth on the left. As a cultivator, it was necessary to maintain enough curiosity, but sometimes one also needed to act according to one's ability. Otherwise, one would be courting death. With a thought, the youth's figure also moved. A long saber had appeared in his hand at some unknown time. The long saber was the same as his figure, pitch black, and did not seem to be a real thing. The youth's figure slightly squatted down, both hands flat, the long saber horizontally in front of his eyes, and the other hand gently brushed the blade. This posture was the same as Yi Xiong's when he used the Tyrant Saber technique. Although it looked similar, the youth's movement made Lu Yi feel as if a sleeping dragon had suddenly awoken. It was as if there was a huge dragon head peeking out from its dragon's lair, overlooking all living things. Under the boundless pressure, not only could Lu Ye's body not move, even his thoughts were almost stagnant. The power of Yi Xiong's attack that day, if it had even a fraction of this youth's figure, Lu Yi would have died 100 times over. It seemed like an instant, but also like a million years. The youth's saber. It was an ordinary straight stab, slow. Such a saber, even an ordinary person who had never cultivated could see it clearly. However, as the long saber moved forward, an unbelievable scene appeared. In the darkness, it was as if the dark clouds had dispersed, revealing countless twinkling stars in the sky. Each of those stars was the flickering light of the saber. The curtain of stars fell, and the overwhelming starlight followed the long saber, surging towards Lu Yi and wrapping him up. The first move of the Tyrant Saber, stars. When Yi Xiong had used this move, Lu Yi had also had this illusion, but he had quickly gotten rid of it. But at this moment, after the young man had used this move, he couldn't get rid of it no matter how hard he tried. It was as if countless stars were really falling from the sky, wrapping the whole curtain of the sky and smashing towards him. Under such heavenly power, who could block it? Perhaps an entire domain would be destroyed. Lu Ye's spirit soul suffered a great deal of pain in an instant, causing him to groan uncontrollably. It felt as if countless sharp knives were cutting his spirit soul. But he was unwilling to even blink, staring at the youth's movements. He opened his mind, allowing his soul to feel the thousands of kinds of pain, carefully perceiving the mysteries of this saber move. Every saber light that cut into Lu Ye's body gave him a new level of enlightenment. Every moment was stretched to the limit, and it seemed like an eternity, but in reality it was only 5 breaths. The starlight in the sky shattered, and the surrounding darkness was swept away. The scene of the wooden house appeared in Lu Ye's vision again. Lu Ye gasped for breath, as if he was drowning, his clothes soaked with sweat. Although he knew that what he experienced in that environment was not real, and was just a vision caused by the inheritance, but it was too real, so real that it was as if he had really been buried under the stars. To be continued. Chapter 694. Death was no stranger to Lu Ye. Ever since he obtained the breath fruit core, he had died countless times in the mirage realm. He had long been able to remain calm. Because he knew that death in the mirage realm was not real, he could be fearless. But in the environment where he stimulated the tyrant saber secret art, when the young man attacked, Lu Ye felt the aura of death was too real. Even if he had died countless times in the mirage realm, he could not help but feel terrified. 3 breaths. He only lasted for 3 breaths of time before his mind withdrew from the black stone. This did not mean that he could really hold on for 3 breaths of time under the power of the saber. If such a saber was really used in the real world, he would have died the moment the saber light flashed. The reason Yangming could last for 3 breaths was mainly because it was a method of inheritance. Every time the saber light slashed his body, the many mysteries of the tyrant saber would surge in his mind, allowing him to have a clearer understanding of the saber's mysteries. Different from the 100 Formation Tower's rude gift of enlightenment, this kind of inheritance was more detailed. The length of time one could hold on should be related to the strength of one's soul. The stronger one's soul, the longer one could hold on and the greater the benefits one could obtain. Lu Ye could hold on for 3 breaths of time, but he estimated that Ying could not hold on for that long. This was indeed the case. When Yi Ying first obtained this tyrant saber's secret art, he couldn't even last a single moment. Even after breaking through to the Cloud River 9th Order, after accumulating his strength over the years, he could only last 2 breaths. As for Pang Wanhai, he could not even hold on for 1 breath of time. Lu Ye could hold on for 3 breaths of time on his first try, which was a very good performance. In the inexplicable space of the inheritance, Lu Ye could actually move, but the moment the young man attacked, Lu Ye had no room to resist. He could only stand in place obediently and bear the power of the tyrant saber. He had a faint feeling that when he could block that move of the tyrant saber, he would be considered to have cultivated the tyrant saber to the great perfection realm. Only then would he be qualified to touch the second move of the tyrant saber. If the first tyrant saber was so powerful, what would the second tyrant saber be like? He could not help but be fascinated. However, rice had to be eaten 1 bite at a time, and the road had to be taken step by step. Lu Ye still understood this truth. This was the real saber art. Compared to this, what Lu Ye had cultivated before was at most some special techniques, including his self-created flash and consecutive slashes. Those were just some techniques used against enemies. In front of such a saber technique, it was like the brilliance of a firefly compared to the bright moon. It was not worth mentioning. But then again, the cultivation of the person who left behind the tyrant saber's secret manual was unfathomably high. How long had Lu Ye cultivated? If he was given enough time, it was not impossible for him to grow to this level or even surpass it. Therefore, he would not belittle himself. It was only right to revere the strong. Working hard was the right way to go. Moreover, looking at it now, the tyrant saber first style Yi Xiong had displayed wasn't even close to the real tyrant saber. Even so, it had made Lu Ye feel a sense of crisis, and he had even been injured. Lu Ye didn't know how high Yi Ying's mastery of this technique was, but it should be stronger than Yi Xiong's. As for how much stronger, it was hard to tell. He focused his mind and calmed his heart to comprehend. In the inheritance space, every slash of the saber was the transmission of the inheritance. It was the teaching of countless years. Just like now, Ying was dead, and the Tyrant Saber Mountain Villa was empty. From now on, there would be no Tyrant Saber Mountain Villa, but the inheritance of the Tyrant Saber art was not cut off. The ingenuity of the Tyrant Saber art was not only limited to the 3 styles, but also the many concepts of this saber art were perfectly contained in the saber art. Yi Ying was able to establish the Tyrant Saber Mountain Villa with the Tyrant Saber first style because he had comprehended and sorted out many things that belonged to him. What Lu Yi needed to do now was to walk the path Yi Ying had walked in the past. Sort out, summarize, and comprehend. It had to be said that this saber art was very compatible with his temperament. When he faced enemies, he was fearless and invincible. Even cultivators with higher cultivation than him would often feel a great sense of oppression. The Tyrant Saber art required this kind of aggressiveness to display the essence of this saber art. After sitting upright for a long time, Lu Yi suddenly stood up and walked out of the door. He came to an open area on the island in the middle of the lake, drew the mountain pan saber from his waist, and gently waved it. His movements were not fast and could be said to be very slow. There was no special power when he waved the saber, and his performance was like that of a beginner. There was nothing praiseworthy about it. But the miraculous thing was that his aura gradually became sharp, almost like a long saber that was about to be unsheathed. The aura of man and saber gradually merged into one. The fusion of man and saber. This was an accomplishment that Lu Yi had achieved long ago when he had advanced to the Cloud River tier. Strictly speaking, a cultivator's spirit tool was an extension of their own body, especially for a weapon cultivator. The reason why Lu Yi did not change his spirit tool when he had advanced to the Cloud River tier, and instead chose to upgrade the Mountain Pan Saber was because the Mountain Pan Saber had accompanied him through almost the entire Spirit Stream tier. He was already familiar with the Mountain Pan Saber, and correspondingly, the saber was also familiar with him. If he were to rashly change to another spirit tool, even if the quality was better, it might not be able to let Lu Yi display his full strength, unless he was willing to spend a lot of time nourishing it. The process of cultivators refining spirit tools was not only to let the spirit tool display more power, but also to strengthen the connection between the cultivator and the spirit tool, so that the cultivator could wield it more freely. The Mountain Pan Saber had been with Lu Yi since he had reached the 5th Order Spirit Stream tier. To Lu Yi, it was a part of his body. But in the end, it was still just a spirit tool. But at this moment, the aura of man and saber were gradually synchronizing. If one did not look with the naked eye, it would be impossible to distinguish the difference between the two. As he waved his saber, Lu Yi suddenly lowered his waist and twisted his body, thrusting his saber forward. A cold light blossomed on the pitch-black saber, and the sound of cracking cloth could be heard. A bright saber mark flashed across the air. A trace of paleness flashed across Lu Ye's face, but he quickly calmed down. He stood in place, thinking about the gains and losses of his saber. After a while, he slowly shook his head. Tyrannical first form, starry sky. Strictly speaking, it was a straight stab. Every ray of starlight that fell from the sky was a flickering saber light. Therefore, although this saber seemed to be just one saber strike, it was actually countless sabers. In order to completely unleash such a saber strike, a cultivator needed to have absolute control over their saber. Only then could they instantly unleash a saber light that was like the twinkling stars. Lu Ye's saber strike was not inferior to Yi Xiong's in terms of pure power, but in terms of the tyrannical saber art itself, it was inferior. After all, no matter what, Yi Xiong had cultivated the tyrannical saber art for a long time, while Lu Yi had only cultivated it for a short time. Not enough, far from enough. Lu Yi closed his eyes again and continued to wield his saber. Although the saber strike just now had consumed a lot of his strength, it was still within an acceptable range. He would not be like Yi Xiong, who had been slaughtered after using the tyrannical saber art. Of course, this was also related to the fact that Lu Yi had not truly displayed the starry sky. With such a saber technique, even if he did not cultivate it to the grand accomplishment stage, Lu Yi felt that he would be invincible in the Cloud River realm. Coupled with his current foundation, he could even kill a ninth-order cultivator with a single strike. He had not forgotten his situation in the Cloud River battlefield, where he was like a rat that everyone wanted to beat up. A sealed world was a sealed world, and there would always be a time when he had to leave. If he could cultivate the tyrannical saber art to the minor accomplishment stage here, he would definitely be able to give the cultivators of Myriad Demons Ridge a pleasant surprise when he returned to the Cloud River battlefield. Xia Liang and Tan Xing were like ghosts that would not disperse. Wherever he went, he could see their shadows. Lu Yi had long wanted to kill these two dogs. There were many things that he needed to comprehend. The huge gift of the 100 Formation Pagoda needed to be comprehended, and the tyrannical saber art also needed to be comprehended. However, this did not hinder Lu Ye's cultivation. Every day, he ate a lot of spirit pills and comprehended all kinds of mysteries. His days were unprecedentedly fulfilling. When he was in the mood, he would practice his saber in the open space in the center of the island. In order to learn the tyrannical saber art faster, Lu Yi even used the soul-cleansing water. The tyrannical saber's saber light in the inheritance space also consumed a lot of his soul. When Yi Ying and Yi Xiong cultivated the tyrannical saber art before, they could only comprehend it once every half a month or even a month. Otherwise, if they consumed too much soul strength in a short period of time, there would definitely be repercussions. Lu Yi did not have such concerns. He had a lot of soul water. Although he used some in the 100 Formation Pagoda, he still had a lot left. When his soul was tired, he would use the soul water to nourish it. On average, he could comprehend it 4 or 5 times a day, which was almost equivalent to the Ying brothers' results in a few months. In this way, Lu Ye's attainments in the tyrannical saber art could be said to have advanced by leaps and bounds. His cultivation did not increase by much, but in terms of saber art, Lu Yi was growing at an unimaginable speed. Lu Yi also studied some of the saber art cultivation notes from the library. Compared to the tyrannical saber art, these notes were naturally not much. However, it was undeniable that these things were good things for Lu Yi. They were also in line with his current attainments. During the half a month in the tyrannical saber mountain villa, he was like a bottomless abyss, swallowing everything he could absorb into his body. His saber art had made great progress. If he were to stand in front of him half a month ago, Lu Yi was even confident that he could finish the battle in 10 strikes. While he was cultivating crazily, Yi Liuli also gradually walked out of the haze. It was mainly because of Yi and Hooper accompanying her every day. Yi also knew that this was a secret realm. Everything she experienced here was very likely to have happened in this world in the past. It was just that it was reproduced by some inexplicable method. Yi Liuli might not even exist. However, Yi could not help but feel pity for this little girl who was about the same age and figure as her. Perhaps it had something to do with her. The starting point of Yi's memories was when she was transformed into a despondent spirit by Hu Po. Before that, she had no idea who she was or where she came from. With Hu Po and Lu Yi, they were her only 2 family members. How could the current Yi Liuli not be the same? End of chapter. Chapter 695. Lu Yi. An exclamation suddenly rang out from the wooden house. Lu Yi, who was immersed in practicing saber techniques at the center of the island, snapped out of his trance and turned to look in the direction of the sound. He had never heard Yi sound so flustered before, which made his heart skip a beat. With a flash, he appeared in the wooden house. Looking over, he saw Yi supporting Yi Liuli in a panic. The latter had already fallen into a coma. Her face was as pale as a sheet, and her body was convulsing uncontrollably, as if she was suffering from hysteria. After spending half a month together, Yi and Yi Liuli's relationship had improved rapidly. Lu Yi was usually busy comprehending saber techniques and the 100 Formation Pagoda's gift, so he had no time to accompany them. The 2 of them played together to pass the time. In the depths of her heart, Yi had already regarded Yi Liuli as one of her few friends. Sometimes, she even fantasized about how great it would be if she could bring her out of this mystic realm. But she knew that was impossible. Just now, the 2 of them had been talking and laughing together, but in the blink of an eye, Yi Liuli had suddenly become like this. It really frightened her. She had never encountered such a thing before. Lu Yi stepped forward and took the convulsing Yi Lioli from Yi's hands. The moment he touched her, he frowned. He had thought that Yi Lioli was suffering from hysteria, but it didn't seem like it because Yi Lioli's body was alternating between hot and cold. One had to know that although this little girl's cultivation wasn't very high, she was still at the Cloud River tier. He suddenly remembered something. Yi Lioli had had a similar problem since she was young. She would act up from time to time, and the intervals were uncertain. Sometimes she wouldn't act up for a few years, and sometimes she would act up once every few months. This information had mysteriously appeared in his mind when he entered this mystic realm. It should be a trick of Tianji. He hurriedly laid Yi Lioli flat on the bed and had Yi press down on her limbs. He pinched Yi Lioli's mouth with one hand to prevent her from biting her own tongue, and used the other hand to remove the storage bag from Yi Lioli's waist. If he remembered correctly, there should be medicine in Yi Lioli's storage bag. There was a restriction on the storage bag, but for the current Lu Yi, it was useless. With just a thought, the restriction lock was opened and he quickly found a wooden box. He opened the box and took out a pill about the size of a cherry. He stuffed it into Yi Lioli's mouth and used his spiritual energy to help her swallow it. After the effects of the medicine dissolved, Yi Lioli's condition slowly improved. However, there was still no trace of blood on her pale face. She was frighteningly cold, like a piece of ice that wouldn't melt even after 10,000 years. What happened to her? He asked worriedly. It's an old ailment that I've had since I was young, Lu Yi replied, her gaze fixed on Yi Lioli. Although her symptoms had improved, there was something wrong with her aura. Lu Yi raised his hand and placed it on her wrist. His spiritual energy wandered as he carefully examined her. Although he was not a medical cultivator, nor had he cultivated anything related to medical cultivation, a simple investigation was not a problem for him. With this investigation, he really did feel something abnormal. He raised his hand and turned Yi Lioli over so that her back was facing him. Then he used his fingers like a sword and used his spiritual energy to open a hole in her clothes. The clothes were torn open, and the girl's snow-white back came into view. However, Lu Ye's brows furrowed tightly. Because in that snow-white skin, there was a hideous mark. At first glance, it looked like a brown centipede. This was a birthmark. Ever since Yi Lioli was born, she had such a birthmark on her back. However, only Yi Ying and his wife knew about this. No matter what, having such a birthmark on a woman's body would affect her beauty, even if it was on her back. If it was just a simple birthmark, it would be fine. The key was that this birthmark was squirming violently at this moment, as if something was about to break out of it. Ah! Yi covered her mouth and exclaimed. Lu Yi pointed a finger at the squirming birthmark. His spiritual energy and thoughts surged together. His brows furrowed even more. When he saw that scene just now, he originally thought that something foreign had entered Yi Lioli's body. However, after careful investigation, he found that there was nothing abnormal in her body at all. The squirming of the birthmark was not caused by an external force. Instead, it seemed that the birthmark was alive. There was something strange about it. However, what could be confirmed now was that Yi Lioli's abnormality should be caused by the change in the birthmark. It could even be said that the problem she had since she was young originated from this. After a moment of careful investigation, Lu Yi really couldn't find anything abnormal. Only then did he stop. If only Hua Si was here. With her attainments in medical cultivation, she might be able to detect something. The squirming of the birthmark gradually calmed down. At the same time, the cold aura on Yi Lioli's body also slowly dissipated. A trace of color gradually returned to her face. The crisis had passed. It should be the effect of that pill. Help her change her clothes, Lu Yi said and walked out of the door. He didn't continue practicing his saber. Instead, he stood not far away and pondered. Yi Lioli's abnormality reminded him of some messy information. For example, this was an old problem Yi Lioli had since she was young. For example, there was medicine in Yi Lioli's storage bag. Another example was Medical Valley, Little Fairy Doctor. These were all information he obtained when he entered this arcane realm. However, he didn't think of it before. Yi Lioli's outburst became the opportunity for him to recall these things. The pills in Yi Lioli's storage bag naturally couldn't have come from nowhere. They came from Medical Valley, from Little Fairy Doctor. The Soaring Dragon realm also had a faction of medical cultivators, and Medical Valley's Little Fairy Doctor was the most famous and powerful medical cultivator in the entire Soaring Dragon realm. When Yi Lioli was young, Ying once took her to Medical Valley to treat her illness. The pills were something he brought back from Medical Valley. However, there weren't many of them. Because these things weren't easy to preserve, Ying had to go to Medical Valley every few years to get new medicine. The last time he left Tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa, it was to get medicine for Yi Lioli. In the end, his whereabouts were leaked by Yi Xiong, and in the end, he was surrounded and killed by Divine Will Sect. And there was only one pill left on Yi Lioli's body. In the dark, Lu Yi spied some guidance. All kinds of signs indicated that he needed to take Yi Lioli to Medical Valley. Otherwise, the next time Yi Lioli had an outburst, there would be no medicine to use. After half a month of cultivation, he had gained a lot. However, cultivation wasn't something that could be done behind closed doors. That was why many cultivators would go out and travel. If he stayed in domineering Saber Mountain Villa, with the many formations he had set up before, even if Divine Will Sect really attacked, they might not be able to do anything to him. However, since he had come to this arcane realm, he couldn't stay here forever. Sixth brother. Yi Lioli's weak voice came from inside the room. It seemed that she had woken up. Lu Yi turned and walked in. He saw that she was lying weakly on the bed. Her clothes had already been changed by Yi. Lu Yi sat beside her. Yi Lioli raised her hand and grabbed his clothes. She looked helpless and weak. "Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" Lu Yi asked. He raised his hand to feel the temperature of her forehead. It was still a little cold, but it was within the normal range. It wasn't as exaggerated as before. Yi Lioli shook her head lightly and said softly, "Sixth brother, don't worry. I'll be fine soon." Sixth brother Yi wasn't in domineering Saber Mountain Villa all year round, so he had never personally encountered such a thing. However, Yi Lioli knew her own situation. When her old illness acted up, she was in so much pain that she wanted to die. However, after it passed, she would be safe and sound. "Take a nap. You'll be fine when you wake up." Yi Lioli followed his advice and gently closed her eyes. However, her small hand was still holding onto Lu Ye's clothes. It was as if she was holding on to not only her only family in this world, but also her last hope. After a while, Yi Lioli's breathing gradually calmed down. Lu Yi picked up her hand and put it back under the blanket. He gave Yi a look. He understood and followed him out of the room. Lu Yi took out a large formation jade pendant and gave it to her. He instructed, "When we can leave, I'll inform you. Bring her to me." He instantly saw through Lu Ye's plan. She wasn't too worried. Lu Yi had survived many big battles like the Cloudy River battlefield. There was no reason for him to fail in this small dragon soaring realm. However, she still couldn't help but remind him, "Be careful." Lu Yi raised his hand and patted her head, gently rubbing it. Only then did he turn and walk out. Since he had decided to leave, the first thing he had to deal with was the cultivators of Divine Will Sect outside. Otherwise, if he brought Yi Lioli with him, it would be difficult for him to escape. Ever since a Divine Will Sect elder fell into domineering Saber Mountain Villa, no one dared to casually barge in. However, this didn't mean that they had left. Such a sudden change in domineering Saber Mountain Villa, and even Vice Sect Master Pang Wanhai was killed. How could Divine Will Sect let this go? The cultivators of Divine Will Sect didn't dare to barge in. They could only monitor the situation outside. Because no one could hide forever. As long as Lu Yi dared to show himself, they could gang up and attack him. In a pavilion outside the villa, Divine Will Sect's third elder, Pei Yuanhua, stared at the silent domineering Saber Mountain Villa with his hands behind his back. Divine Will Sect had two 9th Order Cloud River Realm cultivators. One was Sect Master Xiong Tai Shan, while the other was Vice Sect Master Pang Wanhai. The elders under them were all 8th Order cultivators. There were about a dozen of them. This kind of foundation was considered good in the entire Soaring Dragon realm. However, compared to the real top forces, there was still a big gap. The gap was in the number of 8th and 9th order Cloud River Realm cultivators. Which top force didn't have dozens or hundreds of them? A force like Divine Will Sect was considered good, but it was only a tyrant in Feng Province. As the third elder, he had personally come out to deal with the matter of domineering Saber Mountain Villa. It was enough to show the importance of Divine Will Sect. He had no choice but to take this seriously. A vice sect master was dead, and the 9th elder had also been trapped inside without any news. It was highly likely that he would not survive. In the entire Divine Will Sect, there were only 3 people who were stronger than him. The sect master and great elder had been injured by Yi Ying when they tried to kill him. Now, they were both recovering from their injuries. The second elder needed to oversee Divine Will Sect. As the third elder, he had no choice but to step up. Jing Jing walked to Tang San's side and sat down cross-legged beside him. She nodded lightly at him. Tang San narrowed his eyes. His body slowly floated up. He stood up on the heart of the paradise flower. He took a deep breath. The aura in his body surged. The 9 bloodlines in his body had completely reached a state of balance after the fusion just now. His body began to evolve rapidly. On his forehead, the light pattern of the golden trident reappeared. At this moment, Tang San's aura began to transform. His divine sense fused with the golden trident's brand. Sensing the aura of the golden trident, his eyes began to shine brighter. The sound of waves, like chanting, rang out beside him. An intense light began to rise rapidly. A huge golden shadow was reflected behind him. Tang San's eyes flashed like lightning. He stared at the sky. Suddenly, a loud bang erupted from the paradise flower, and a huge golden pillar of light soared into the sky, piercing through the clouds. Not far away, the heavenly fox great demon emperor felt a shocking will erupt. The entire hell garden trembled violently. The flowers began to wither rapidly. All of the luck seemed to be condensing toward the golden pillar of light. His expression changed drastically. He did not dare to be negligent. With a shake of his body, he revealed his true form. He had transformed into a 9-tailed fox that was more than 100 meters long. Each of his tails was more than 300 meters long. His 9 tails covered the sky. He emitted a large amount of luck and injected it into Hellgarden, stabilizing the realm. Hellgarden must not be destroyed. Otherwise, it would be a devastating disaster for the Heavenly Foxes. Ancestral Court, Sacred Heavenly Fox Mountain. The golden light that had been restrained suddenly became intense again. Not only that, but the sacred Heavenly Fox Mountain's body also emitted a white light. However, the white light seemed to be collapsing inward. A golden beam of light shot up into the sky without any warning, instantly soaring high into the sky. The rulers, who had just resisted another heavenly tribulation, subconsciously scattered. In the next moment, the golden pillar of light had already rushed into the tribulation cloud. The pitch-black tribulation cloud was instantly lit up and turned into dark golden clouds. All of the purple color disappeared at this moment. Instead, it was replaced by huge golden thunderbolts. It seemed to have filled the entire realm with anger. Chapter 696. Pei Yuan Hua was 70 years old, but due to his cultivation he looked like he was in his 40s or 50s with a ruddy face. Logically speaking, with Yi Ying's death and the Yi family's annihilation, the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa should have been destroyed. But now, in his eyes, the mountain villa was like a sleeping beast that could erupt at any time and bare its fangs. The 9th elder's strength was almost the same as his, but he had disappeared without a trace after exploring the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa once. How could he not be afraid? He could not understand how things had developed to this point. No one knew how Pang Wanhai had died. Although many people had escaped from the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa that day, no one had witnessed the battle with their own eyes. However, from the information they had, there should be an expert behind Yi Lu, and that expert's attainments in array Dao were extremely high. At the very least, they were much higher than the 9th elder. Because the 9th elder was also an array cultivator, he had volunteered to investigate the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa a few days ago, but he had disappeared just like that. I don't believe you can hide there forever. Pei Yuanhua gnashed his teeth as he looked in the direction of the tyrannical saber mountain villa. Powerful array cultivators were indeed frightening, but array cultivators themselves were not very strong. As long as they were not given space to display their abilities, they were not a threat. The Divine Will sect had suffered heavy casualties this time, but the tyrannical saber technique had not succeeded. Xiong Tai-shan was furious, and if not for the fact that he needed to treat his injuries, he would have come personally. But before that he had already given Pei Yuanhua a death order to kill the 2 Yi family brats. Having cultivated in the soaring dragon realm for so many years, how could he not know the principle of eliminating the source of trouble? As long as the 2 Yi family brats were alive, he would not be able to live in peace. Suddenly, a scream and spiritual energy fluctuation came from a certain direction. Pei Yuanhua immediately turned his head and looked in that direction, only to see a sharp blade light flickering a few miles away. The Divine Will sect cultivators responsible for monitoring the movements of the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa had been killed and their blood flowed like a river. Amidst the blade light, a youth's figure could be seen moving. "How dare you!" Pei Yuanhua was furious. With a flick of his sleeve, he jumped up like an eagle and pounced in that direction. He had been fretting over how to find that brat from the Yi clan. He had not expected that the brat would show up of his own accord and even dare to kill his Divine Will sect's disciples. Before this, no one had actually discovered how he had walked out of the tyrannical saber villa. Several miles away, Lu Yi stood with his saber in hand, surrounded by several corpses. The Divine Will sect only thought that there was a hidden expert behind him. They didn't expect that the hegemonic Saber Mountain Villa's array formations were all his own. Not only was he proficient in formations, but he was also proficient in concealment and assassination. The current Yi Lu was no longer the original Yi Lu of the Soaring Dragon Realm. He was the famous Yi Lu of the Spirit Stream battlefield, the Spirit Stream 3 disasters. The cultivators of the Divine Will sect didn't have high cultivation levels to begin with, so how could they survive after he had sneaked up on them? In fact, if Lu Yi wanted to, he could even kill Pei Yuanhua. However, his goal was not simply to kill the enemy. He wanted to lure the people from the Divine Will sect away, which was why he had taken the initiative to expose himself. When he looked up, he saw a figure pouncing towards him from several miles away. This figure's aura was at the level of an 8th-order Cloud River realm. He immediately understood that this was one of the higher-ups of the Divine Will sect, most likely an elder. In the distance, Lu Yi was stepping on a Divine Will sect disciple. The disciple had not died yet and was still struggling, but he could not get up under Lu Ye's restraint. Pei Yuanhua shouted angrily, "Junior, don't be so arrogant." As if responding to his words, Lu Yi exerted force with his foot, causing the Divine Will sect disciple's chest to cave in. The disciple spat out a mouthful of blood mixed with pieces of internal organs as his vitality dissipated. "You're courting death." Pei Yuanhua was even more furious. He naturally didn't care about the life or death of a disciple. What angered him was Lu Ye's attitude. This brat was clearly provoking him. In the blink of an eye, they were only half a mile apart. Only then did Lu Yi calmly fly up and flee into the distance. In an instant, near the tyrannical Saber Mountain Manor, streams of light shot up into the sky like a meteor shower, chasing after Lu Yi. On the small island at the center of Saber Lake, Yi heard the commotion outside and knew that Lu Yi had already made his move. However, she didn't act rashly. Instead, she asked Hupa to stay behind and look after Yi Luli while she quietly snuck out and investigated the surroundings of the mountain manor. She really did find a few Divine Will sect disciples guarding the mountain manor. However, these people's cultivations weren't high. After Yi's sudden sneak attack, they had no chance to fight back and died one after another. After an incense stick's worth of time, the Snow-White Tiger's vigorous figure rushed out of the tyrannical Saber Mountain Manor. On its back sat 2 girls. All the way north, 100 miles east of the tyrannical Saber Mountain Manor, there was a narrow valley. Under Lu Ye's intentional or unintentional actions and the efforts of the Divine Will sect's cultivators, he was finally trapped here with no way out. "Brat, let's see if you can survive this." Pei Yuanhua shouted angrily. Lu Yi slowly unsheathed his saber. The sound of his saber being unsheathed was long and hoarse, making those who heard it feel as if ants were crawling on their hearts. It was extremely uncomfortable. Lu Ye's eyes drooped as he spoke. I don't know if I'll die or not, but... His figure suddenly turned into a blur and instantly arrived in front of Pei Yuanhua. His speed was so fast that Pei Yuanhua's expression changed greatly. Was this brat pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger? This laughable thought suddenly appeared in Pei Yuanhua's mind, but his body had already reacted instinctively. A spirit artifact that resembled a ferrule suddenly appeared in his hand. He poured his spiritual energy into it, causing it to split into several shadows that shot towards Lu Ye's head. However, in the next instant he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. It was clearly daytime, but in his perception, it felt as if the curtain of night had suddenly descended, followed by specks of starlight blooming in his field of vision. An indescribable sense of invasion and oppression pressed down on him like a mountain, causing his body to stiffen. The tyrannical saber art. Pei Yuanhua was greatly shocked because the power of this saber had exceeded his imagination. He had also participated in the battle against Yi Ying. Before Yi Ying had died, he had used this saber. Under that saber, Xiong Taishan and the Great Elder had both been injured. The reason why he had been able to escape unscathed was mainly because Yi Ying's saber had not been aimed at him. However, having personally experienced the power of that saber, he naturally had a deep impression of it. Compared to Yi Ying's saber, Sixth Ye's saber was not as good, but it did not seem to be too far off. This brat was so young, so how could he have cultivated the tyrant saber art to such a level? He had never heard of this brat having such a high level of attainment in the tyrant saber art before. What he did not know was that Yi Ying could only enter the inheritance space once every half a month to a month, but recently, Lu Yi had been entering 4 or 5 times a day. What he had obtained in half a month was equivalent to what Yi Ying had obtained in 7 or 8 years. In terms of cultivating the tyrant saber art, Lu Yi could already be considered a beginner. He could barely use the first move of the tyrant saber art. It was probably not as good as Yi Ying's, but it was still much stronger than Yi Xiong's. Along with this saber strike, Lu Ye's essence, qi, and soul poured out. Originally, Lu Yi didn't need to use the tyrant saber art to deal with an 8th order cultivator. This saber technique was terrifyingly powerful, but it also consumed a lot of energy. However, Lu Yi still used it, mainly because he wanted to test the results of his recent cultivation. He needed a target to test his strength on in order to understand his gains and losses. Otherwise, if he just practiced on his own, many of his shortcomings would be difficult to detect. In Pei Yuanhua's field of vision, under the night sky, starlight shrouded the sky, but in the eyes of the many divine will sect disciples, the heavens and earth had lost all color, leaving only this bright saber light. The ruler shadow collapsed and Lu Ye's figure brushed past Pei Yuanhua's shoulder, the latter half of his sentence slowly leaving his mouth. In any case, you're definitely dead. Behind him, Pei Yuanhua stood frozen in place, as if he had been struck by a lightning talisman. His face was twitching, and his eyes were quickly filled with shock. How could this Yi family's 6th brother be so strong? Although the tyrant saber art was amazing, it required a corresponding cultivation to fully display its power. Yi Lu was just a trivial 6th order cultivator, so even if he could use the tyrant saber art, it should be impossible for him to kill Lu Yi. But in fact, a trace of understanding appeared in Lu Ye's heart. This little brat was really pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Divine Will Sect had underestimated him all this time, and if he didn't die, Divine Will Sect would be doomed. Specks of red seeped out and soon dyed Pei Yuanhua's clothes red. From the outside, Pei Yuanhua didn't seem to be injured, but in fact, his heart had been pierced. The first form of the tyrant saber was a straight stab. Accompanied by a long breath, Lu Ye's body fell heavily to the ground. The group of Divine Will Sect disciples were frightened out of their wits. Under the leadership of 3rd Elder, they had finally managed to trap Yi Lu here. They had thought it would be a casual battle, but before they could even begin, their 3rd Elder had fallen. No one present had been able to clearly see what had happened. 3rd Elder? Someone called out in a trembling voice, imagining that third elder would suddenly stand up and continue to lead them, but there was no response. Ah! Cries of alarm rang out. Their strongest third elder had been killed by Yi Lu in a single blow, so how could they possibly be his opponent? However, there were still some bold and careful disciples who saw that many of their companions were frightened out of their wits and immediately shouted, "Let's attack together, he's just one person." In this situation, they couldn't scatter and escape, otherwise, they would be giving the enemy a chance to kill them one by one. If they worked together, they might still have a chance to survive. His words woke everyone up from their daze, and the other Divine Will sect disciples who were still in shock came back to their senses. Yes, although Yi Lu was powerful, he was still just one person. There were more than 30 Divine Will sect disciples present, so if they attacked together, how could they fail? Moreover, they had heard that the Tyrant Saber art consumed a lot of energy, so Yi Lu might have already used up all his energy. However, this fantasy was quickly shattered, because as soon as that person finished speaking, Lu Yi moved. Yi Xiong had used up all his energy after using the Tyrant Saber art, but that was because his cultivation of the Tyrant Saber art hadn't reached perfection. To Lu Yi, the Tyrant Saber art consumed a lot of energy, but it was still within an acceptable range. Right now, he still had the energy to fight. To be continued. Chapter 697. Lu Ye's fighting style was aggressive to begin with, but this had nothing to do with his temperament. It was mainly due to his experience. His temperament was actually relatively calm, and he was definitely not an overbearing person. But before he started cultivating, he was a slave miner in Evil Moon Valley. It was a dog-eat-dog place. In such an environment, if one wasn't ruthless enough, they wouldn't be able to survive. The battles between mortals were sometimes more tragic than cultivators. Later, he was accepted by sect Master Tang Yifeng as a disciple and entered the Blue Blood sect. But before he could even see the sect, he was sent to the Spirit Stream battlefield. He was alone and had no one to rely on. Facing all kinds of enemies, he could only break through with strength. There was no room for retreat. So, when it came to fighting, he had always adhered to a philosophy, or rather, a habit. He was brave and oppressive, and regardless of whether he could win, he couldn't lose in terms of momentum. His fighting style was undoubtedly in line with the essence of the Tyrant Saber art. This was also the reason why he was able to achieve such a high level of attainment in the Tyrant Saber art in just half a month. Not only could he use the soul water to relieve the pressure on his divine soul, but more importantly, the Tyrant Saber art was compatible with him. If it were another cultivator with a weak temperament, they might not be able to achieve such growth no matter how much soul water they had. If their compatibility was not compatible, it would be meaningless to study hard. Although the secret inheritance of the Tyrant Saber art only contained 3 forms of the Tyrant Saber, and Lu Yi had only learned the first form, the Tyrant Saber art contained more than just these 3 forms. This was a complete saber art in itself. In the process of cultivating the first form, Lu Yi undoubtedly had a very deep understanding and comprehension of this saber art. At this moment, the pressure he felt was much stronger than before. In the eyes of many Divine Will sect disciples, Lu Yi was no longer human. He was clearly a tiger coming down from the mountains, a dragon coming out of the sea, ready to devour people. No cultivator could survive a single blow from him. As the saber flashed, screams rang out. Corpses fell to the ground, and blood stained the ground. In less than 20 breaths of time, more than 30 Divine Will sect cultivators had knocked down more than 10 people. Lu Yi was unscathed. In the Soaring Dragon realm, the 8th and 9th order cultivators who hadn't made any progress in their cultivation did indeed have a lot of time to polish their fighting skills, so they were generally stronger than the 8th and 9th order cultivators of the 9 provinces. However, this didn't include the disciples of the Divine Will sect. Among these people, the highest cultivation was only at the 7th order, and there were only 3 of them. The rest were all below the 7th order, and there were even some at the 1st or 2nd order of Cloud River realm. With Lu Ye's current strength, killing such an opponent was a piece of cake. It was as easy as chopping up vegetables, and he could kill a little kid with a single slash. As Lu Yi moved around, he sensed the Pan Mountain saber in his hand, feeling the might of each saber strike. His understanding of the tyrant's saber art deepened. Not only did his aura not weaken, but it also grew stronger as he fought. Oh my God! Finally, some of the Divine Will Sect's disciples couldn't take it anymore. With a roar, they turned around and ran away. They had thought that even if the third elder had died in battle, they would still be able to take down Lu Yi. They had thought that after Lu Yi used the tyrant saber technique, even if he wasn't completely exhausted, he would be an arrow at the end of its flight. However, in the end, they still thought that he would die. After more than half of them were killed or injured, the panic in their hearts finally took over, and they followed their instincts to survive. However, just as they moved, a buzzing sound rang out, and several streams of light shot towards them. Their protective spirit chi was broken, and the streams of light pierced through their bodies, bringing with them a few puffs of blood. Under the powerful force of inertia, their corpses flew a few meters forward and fell to the ground. Run in different directions. Now, someone roared. What if they couldn't defeat the enemy? Naturally, they could only run. What if they couldn't escape? They just had to run faster than their companions. That was what everyone was thinking. After that roar, there were only 8 disciples of the Divine Will Sect left alive. The 8 of them fled in 8 different directions, each of them activating their own life-saving secret techniques. For a moment, streams of light of various colors flashed in all directions. As expected, Lu Yi couldn't chase after all of them. The Imperial artifact in his box buzzed as he attacked 2 of them while he pounced on another. After killing this person, he quickly turned around and pounced on another. It was a good idea to escape in different directions. If it was used to deal with other cultivators, it might be effective. However, if they weren't fast enough, it would be meaningless. After half a cup of tea's time, Lu Yi had chased them for 15 kilometers and killed the last Divine Will Sect's cultivator with his saber. At this point, the enemies who were chasing after him were all wiped out. Lu Yi sheathed his saber with a calm expression. His eyes flickered as he thought about the gains and losses of this battle. It had to be said that cultivating the tyrant saber technique for half a month had brought him great improvement. Compared to half a month ago, his cultivation base hadn't increased much, but his attainments in saber techniques had improved tremendously. Most importantly, he now had his own set of saber techniques. He had his own set of techniques in the past, but they were scattered, which was reflected in the process of him fighting his enemies. He didn't have the ability to summarize them. Now, with the help of the tyrant saber technique, he had an intuitive understanding of his saber technique system. This was very beneficial. To put it simply, Lu Ye's previous cultivation in saber techniques was almost like a blind man walking. Wherever he went, he might occasionally hit a wall or something. Even if he extorted a lot of saber techniques from the Wild Saber sect, which allowed him to take fewer detours, he was still blind in the end. Now it was different. There was light in his eyes, and there was a path in front of him. It was the path of saber techniques. As long as he continued to cultivate along this path, he could continuously improve his attainments in saber techniques. This was his path, which was different from the improvement of his cultivation base. The improvement of his cultivation base was a broad path shared by all cultivators. As long as he cultivated step by step, cultivators could go further and further on this broad path. However, no matter which cultivator it was, they should have their own path. It wasn't easy. It had been 2 or 3 years since he started cultivating. It was only today that he finally saw the path in front of him. Lu Yi couldn't help but sigh. After taking out a few spirit pills and swallowing them, Lu Yi began to contact Yi. After confirming the direction, he began to head north. A day later, at the border of Feng State and Jia State, Rui City, Taiyan Restaurant. This was the largest and most luxurious restaurant in the entire Rui City. It was full of guests every day. On the 3rd floor of the restaurant, Lu Yi, Yi, and Yi Lioli sat at a table, eating a few of the restaurant's signature dishes. Lu Yi rarely went to places like restaurants. Looking at his life after he stepped into cultivation, he was either cultivating or being hunted down. He didn't have the leisure to be so elegant. The reason he came here was Yi Lioli's suggestion. Because she remembered that when she was young, when she followed Ying north, they passed by Rui City and had a meal in this restaurant. However, she was still young at that time and couldn't remember many things clearly. Now that Ying was gone, her elder brother was like a father. Lu Yi took her along, walking the same path as when she was young and eating the same dishes as when she was young. Lu Yi naturally didn't mind and let her do as she pleased. There were many cultivators in the restaurant, and even more mortals. This was the atmosphere of the entire soaring dragon realm. The boundary between cultivators and mortals was very blurry. This made Lu Yi feel strange. Since entering the spirit stream battlefield, he hadn't seen a single mortal. All the cultivators he came into contact with were all cultivators of similar cultivation levels as him. He didn't even know what the atmosphere in the 9 states was like. Many guests were eating and stuffing themselves. There were also storytellers telling novel stories in a cadence. There were even people talking loudly. Restaurants, tea houses, brothels had always been places where dragons and snakes mixed together. Have you heard that 3 days ago, Senior Lisa of the Imperial Heavenly Sect passed away? Someone's voice suddenly rang out. As this voice rang out, the noisy restaurant suddenly fell silent. Many people looked surprised. Obviously, they hadn't heard the news. The transmission of information in the soaring dragon realm wasn't as convenient as in the 9 states. If it was in the 9 states, such a big matter could spread to any corner with cultivators in half a day. The Imperial Heavenly Sect was an extremely ancient sect. The current situation in the soaring dragon realm was quite strange. The upper limit of cultivators' cultivation was very low. No matter how hard they cultivated, they couldn't break through the shackles of the Cloud River realm. Therefore, almost all the sects, big or small, had 9th order cultivators. If one's cultivation wasn't at the 9th order, they would be too embarrassed to establish a sect. The difference was that the number of 9th order cultivators was different. The more 9th order cultivators there were, the stronger the sect would naturally be. In the entire world, the Imperial Heavenly Sect was undoubtedly one of the overlords. The other 2 recognized overlords were the Vajra Temple and Howran Academy. The 3 overlords were divided into 3 sides in the soaring dragon realm, dominating each realm. There were many sects in this world. In the end, there were still some sects that were similar to these 3 on the surface, but only these 3 were recognized as overlords. This wasn't just because they were strong enough, but more importantly because of their inheritances. These 3 sects, they were all great sects that existed 1,000 years ago. As early as 1,000 years ago, they were already the overlords of the soaring dragon realm. In the 9 states, sects with 1,000-year-old inheritances weren't much. They could be said to be everywhere. But the soaring dragon realm was different. The upper limit of a cultivator was too low. When the inheritance was passed down from generation to generation, it was very easy to have some situations where there was a shortage of manpower. Once or twice, the foundation of a sect would be damaged. If it happened too many times, the sect would inevitably weaken and eventually be destroyed. For example, the tyrannical Saber Villa had only existed for 20 years, and now it was gone. There were many rising and destroyed forces like the tyrannical Saber Villa in the soaring dragon realm. The great sects of the 9 states wouldn't be like this. As long as there was a Spirit Sea Realm cultivator in charge, even if 1 or 2 generations didn't have outstanding missions, there would always be a 3rd or 4th generation. There would always be a chance for them to stand up again. The Sacred Flame Sect, Golden Cloud Tower, and 100 Refinements Valley were forcefully knocked down from 1st grade great sects to 4th grade great sects. There were no signs of them being destroyed because their foundations were strong enough. If the sects of the soaring dragon realm were to suffer such a blow, they would have long disappeared. Compared to the 2 realms, the survival of the sects of the soaring dragon realm was undoubtedly much more fragile. Therefore, the sects that could maintain their overlord status from 1,000 years ago until now were extremely difficult to deal with. Chapter 698. The 3 overlords had been passed down for thousands of years. This also meant that these 3 clans once had divine ocean realm and true lake realm cultivators. They also possessed the secret to breaking through the shackles of the Cloud River realm. This was something that the other clans in the Soaring Dragon realm didn't possess. But even the cultivators of these three clans were getting worse and worse after the appearance of the Sky Gap. Li Sa of the Imperial Heavenly Sect had already reached the transformative realm more than 200 years ago, reaching the peak of the Cloud River tier. All these years, he had been comprehending the secrets of the true lake, not only for himself, but also for the cultivation world of the Soaring Dragon realm. However, in the end, his strength was still insufficient. Today, his lifespan had come to an end and he had passed away. Everyone couldn't help but sigh. When the news spread, all the major clans in the Soaring Dragon realm were shocked. Senior Li Sa is gone. That Master Fa Hua of the Diamond Temple probably won't live for long. Someone sighed. In terms of age, that Master Fa Hua was older than Li Sa. That master was someone who had truly witnessed the might of a true Lake Realm cultivator. When he was born, there were still true Lake Realm cultivators in the Soaring Dragon realm. The reason why he could live longer than Li Sa was mainly because the cultivation technique of the Diamond Temple focused on tempering the body. With vigorous blood and qi, one's lifespan would be longer. But thinking about it, he was about to reach his limit. The passing of such seniors wasn't just a temporary loss to the cultivation world. It also represented the loss of the Soaring Dragon realm's foundation. The Royal Heaven Sect had such a character, the Vajra Temple had such a character, and the Howran Academy also had such a character. As a cultivator, it was undoubtedly a sad thing to reach the end of the path because of the limitations of the world. If such changes continued in the Soaring Dragon realm, there might be no such thing as a group of cultivators in the future. To Senior Li Sa, someone stood up and held a wine cup. He bowed towards the direction of the Imperial Heavenly Sect and poured the wine on the ground. To Senior Li Sa, everyone followed suit. The atmosphere in the restaurant was heavy. Disregarding everything else, just sitting there for 200 years to find a way out for the cultivation world of the Soaring Dragon realm was enough to make people respect him. Even if he failed in the end, the heavy atmosphere didn't last long. Most of the cultivators were open-minded. With a voice, the dull restaurant became lively again. Everyone, have you heard? Half a month ago, the tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa in the Feng province was destroyed. Yi Ying was killed, and the entire Yi clan was practically exterminated. Who did it? Someone asked. I'm not too sure about that, but I heard that it was done by the Divine Will sect. These two clans have a grudge against each other, so it's not surprising that the Divine Will sect would take action. It's just a pity that the Tyrant Saber technique is lost. I heard that it's an incredible saber technique. With the Yi clan gone, I'm afraid that the Tyrant Saber technique will no longer exist in this world. Lu Yi of Lu of Lu. Of Lu. But from the news, the world only knew that the Tyrant Saber Manor was destroyed. They didn't know that Yi Lu and Yi Lioli were still alive. They didn't even know that the Divine Will sect suffered a great loss at the hands of the Tyrant Saber Manor. Even their vice sect master, Pang Wanhai, and 2 elders were killed. This wasn't strange. The Tyrant Saber Manor wasn't the only enemy of the Divine Will sect. Since they suffered such a great loss, they naturally wouldn't spread the news. Lu Yi couldn't spread the news either. Therefore, these things were kept secret for the time being. The cultivators talked about all sorts of things. The topic changed very quickly. After all, most of the things they talked about weren't their personal experiences. They just treated it as a topic of conversation. After talking about the Tyrant Saber Manor, they talked about the strange phenomenon in the Feng province a few days ago. A divine weapon was born, causing countless cultivators to fight. Blood flowed like a river. It was said that even the Howran Academy was alerted. In the end, no one knew who obtained the divine weapon that appeared in the world. Then they talked about the heavenly gully in the far north. Some people saw a shadow rolling in the gully. The rumors about the heavenly gully hadn't stopped since 800 years ago in the Soaring Dragon realm. That was because the changes in the Soaring Dragon realm started with the inexplicable appearance of the heavenly gully. In 800 years, the upper limit of the cultivators went from the Divine Sea realm to the True Lake realm, and then to the current Cloud River. The spirituality of the whole world seemed to be constantly flowing away with the appearance of the heavenly gully. However, Although the heavenly gully had appeared 800 years ago, it had always been in the sky of the far north. It hadn't changed much. This attracted countless cultivators to go and take a look. Because of this, a force called the Heavenly Gully sect was born. The headquarters of the Heavenly Gully sect was in the Snow province, not far from the Heavenly Gully. The cultivators of the Heavenly Gully sect all believed in one truth. The Heavenly Gully was a gift from heaven. Comprehending the mystery of the Heavenly Gully would allow the cultivators to find the path beyond the Cloud River. Most of the cultivators in the Soaring Dragon realm scoffed at this, but there were also many cultivators who had reached their limits who wanted to try and comprehend the mysteries of the Heavenly Gully. It was also because of this that the Heavenly Gully sect had a mix of good and bad people. However, it was undeniable that there were many masters in the sect. Many of them were old Ninth Order Cloud River realm cultivators. Some people even felt that the Heavenly Gully sect's current heritage wasn't inferior to the other three overlords. The cultivators in the restaurant were still talking loudly. Lu Yi had already paid for the food and wine. He took Yi and Yi Lioli out of the North City Gate, summoned the spirit boat, and continued north. In the air, a stream of light flashed quickly. It was a shuttle-shaped flying spirit artifact. A short man sat on top of it. His face was as pale as paper. Judging from the aura fluctuations on his body, he was a Ninth Order Cloud River realm cultivator. However, this person seemed to be seriously injured. His aura was extremely weak. As he flew, he would suddenly spit out a mouthful of blood. The flying spirit artifact also shook and almost fell from the sky. Damned woman! Damned woman! The man spat out the blood in his mouth and cursed through gritted teeth. He didn't expect that he would encounter such misfortune when he thought that it was a great opportunity. What kind of opportunity was that? It was simply a malicious spirit that came to take his life. There were several times when he wanted to throw away the thing he had obtained from the fire a few days ago because it was the cause of his current condition. However, every time he took it out and wanted to throw it away, he couldn't bear to. After all, although this thing was dangerous, he could feel the terrifying power it contained. It was definitely not a power that a Cloud River realm cultivator could unleash. It was indeed a rare treasure. How could he be willing to throw it away just like that? These days, he had searched for famous medical cultivators in the vicinity, but none of them could alleviate his injuries. Now, there was only one last hope left. Snow Province's Medicine Valley, the little fairy doctor. All the way north. The Imperial Heaven sect. The atmosphere in the sect had been quiet for the past few days. Lisa's death was undoubtedly a big blow to the Imperial Heaven sect. Cultivators were open-minded by nature. Life and death were common occurrences to them. They didn't have to wear mourning clothes because of one person's death. In fact, they didn't even have a grand funeral. Only some of the higher-ups of the Imperial Heaven sect placed Lisa's body in a hidden place and buried her. The current sect master of the Imperial Heaven sect, Huang Liang, had been busy with this matter for the past few days. He only finished today. Walking out of the tomb where Lisa's body was placed, Huang Liang said softly, "I'll set off now. I'll have to trouble you all to take care of the sect." Vice Sect Master Kui Yuanshan said, "Sect Master, let me go." The other elder-level cultivators also volunteered one after another. No one knew why Huang Liang wanted to take a look at Sky Ravine at this time. Huang Liang shook his head. "I'll only be at ease if I go personally." He didn't say much. When Lisa passed away, he was by her side. In terms of status, he was Lisa's personal disciple. At that time, Lisa already felt that her lifespan was coming to an end and prepared to say some last words. However, just as she was about to say her last words, she suddenly looked toward the north in a daze. Her eyes revealed a look of fear, and then she stopped breathing. Thinking back to the scene that day, Huang Liang faintly felt that at the last moment of her life, her master must have seen something. In the north, only an existence like Sky Ravine could attract her master's attention. Therefore, after taking care of Lisa's funeral, Huang Liang decided to go to Sky Ravine to take a look. He wanted to know what her master saw before she passed away. As he said this, he had already summoned his spirit tool and soared into the sky. In the Diamond Temple, the sound of chanting sutras accompanied by the crisp sound of a wooden fish rang out. As a great sect with a legacy of thousands of years, the atmosphere in the Diamond Temple was undoubtedly solemn. In the deepest forbidden area of the Diamond Temple, a young novice monk was sweeping the fallen leaves on the ground. Suddenly he sensed something and looked up. What he saw gave him a fright. He did not know when a thin figure appeared in front of him. The figure was so thin that it was as if she was only skin and bones. Her face was covered in layers of wrinkles and dark spots. Only a pair of eyes were as bright as the stars. The figure appeared out of nowhere and stood in front of the young novice monk. She quietly looked toward the north and frowned. The two snow-white eyebrows beside her eyebrows trembled. Grandmaster? The young novice monk finally recognized the figure and hurriedly bowed. This person was Monk Fa Hua, who had been sitting in the forbidden area of the Diamond Temple for 300 years. The young novice monk had never seen him before, but who else would dare to appear in the forbidden area at this time other than the Grandmaster? However, when the young novice monk raised his head again, the figure was gone. The thin and weak old man who appeared in front of him just now had already disappeared. He was reading a book. Did I see a ghost? The young novice monk was shocked and his face turned pale. He hurriedly threw away the broom in his hand and ran out, shouting, "It's a ghost! It's a ghost!" After a while, a group of monks rushed over after hearing the news. They were all burly and full of vitality. After a round of investigation, they confirmed that their Grand Master was gone. The group of monks was confused. None of them knew why their Grand Master came out of seclusion without a word and disappeared without a trace. Jing Jing walked to Tang San's side and sat down cross-legged beside him. She nodded her head lightly. Tang San squinted his eyes and his body slowly floated up. He stood up on the heart of the heaven's flower. He took a deep breath and the aura in his body surged. The 9 bloodlines in his body had already reached a state of balance after the fusion. His body began to improve rapidly. On his forehead, the light pattern of the golden trident appeared again. At this moment, Tang San's aura began to transform. His divine sense and the imprint of the golden trident fused together. He sensed the aura of the golden trident and his eyes began to brighten. The sound of waves that sounded like chanting could be heard beside him. An intense light began to rise rapidly and a huge golden shadow appeared behind him. Tang San's eyes were like lightning as he stared at the sky. Instantly, a loud bang erupted from the heaven's flower. A huge golden light pillar soared into the sky and into the clouds. Not far away, the heavenly fox great demon emperor felt a shocking will erupt. The entire hell garden trembled violently, and the flowers began to wither rapidly. All of the luck seemed to be gathering toward the golden light pillar. His expression changed drastically, but he did not dare to be negligent. With a shake of his body, he revealed his true form. He turned into a 9-tailed heavenly fox that was more than 100 meters long. Each of his tails was more than 300 meters long. His 9 tails covered the sky and blotted out the sun. He emitted a large amount of luck and injected it into the Hell Garden to stabilize the realm. The Hell Garden must not be destroyed. Otherwise, it would be a devastating disaster for the heavenly foxes. In the ancestral court, the heavenly fox sacred mountain. The golden light that had been restrained suddenly became intense again. Not only that, but the heavenly fox sacred mountain's body also emitted a white light. However, the white light seemed to be collapsing inward. A golden beam of light shot up into the sky without any warning, instantly soaring high into the sky. The rulers, who had just withstood another thunderbolt disaster, subconsciously scattered. In the next instant, the golden light pillar had already rushed into the thunderbolt clouds. The pitch-black tribulation cloud was instantly lit up and turned into a dark golden cloud. All the purple color disappeared at this moment and was replaced by a huge golden thunderbolt. It seemed to have filled the entire realm with fury. Chapter 699. In the deepest part of Howran Academy, in front of a thatched cottage, a man in a green robe was holding a scroll in one hand and a fishing rod in the other. There was Li Sa in the Imperial Heavenly Sect, Fa Hua in the Jingang Temple, and Lu Tianyi in Howren Academy. The three of them could be said to be the oldest people in the entire Soaring Dragon realm. However, unlike Li Sa and Fa Hua who were old, Lu Tianyi looked like he was only about 40 years old at first glance. Compared to the other two, he was undoubtedly much younger. This was not because he was good at maintaining his appearance, but because of the difference in the way of cultivation. The way of cultivation in Howren Academy was particular about a little Howren Chi. He lived a more carefree life than the other two. His youthful mentality was reflected in his body, making it difficult for him to look old. Of course, this was also the reason why Lu Tianyi's attainments in the way of Howren were not low. This kind of attainment had nothing to do with his cultivation realm, but with his state of mind. The fishing float floating on the water suddenly sank. A dragging force came from the fishing rod in his hand, but Lu Tianyi did not move at all. He just looked up to the north. His original carefree attitude had disappeared and was replaced by seriousness and confusion. A breeze blew, and Lu Tianyi's figure had already disappeared. The fishing rod was also dragged into the water. On the horizon, a stream of light flew straight to the north. Almost at the same time, Lu Tianyi and Fa Hua of the Jingang Temple felt something. Compared to Li Sa, who had already passed away, they were 3 days later. This was not because Li Sa's cultivation was higher, but because when people were about to die, they could see and feel things that others could not feel. The three of them were rankers who had lived the longest in the Soaring Dragon realm. All of them had inherited a part of the realm's destiny. They might not be able to improve their cultivation, but they could vaguely sense the changes in the Soaring Dragon realm. The seriously injured cultivators, Huang Liang of the Imperial Heavenly Sect, Fa Hua of the Jingang Temple, Lu Tianyi, Lu Yi, and Yi Lioli of Howren Academy, were all heading north. The territory of the Soaring Dragon realm was actually not big. It was much smaller than the 9 states. In one day, Lu Yi took Yi Lioli and Yi out of Feng Province and into Jia Province. In another day, they had already passed Gan Province. If they continued forward, they would be in Snow Province. Although Snow Province was famous for its snow, it didn't snow all year round. It was just that it was located in the north, so the temperature was generally lower. However, the change in temperature did not affect the cultivators that much. What made Lu Yi feel at ease was that Yi Lioli's old illness showed no signs of acting up during these few days. But then again, Yi Lioli's illness didn't flare up very often. Sometimes, it would flare up once every few months, and sometimes it would flare up every few years. Therefore, there should be plenty of time. They rested in the wild at night and continued their journey at dawn. Finally, they arrived at the Snow Province. The medicine valley of the little fairy doctor was in the Snow Province. It was not far away. Based on Lu Ye's current speed, it would take at most 1 day to arrive. When they arrived in Snow Province, the ravine was already visible in the distance. When Lu Yi entered this realm, he had some information about the ravine in his mind. Therefore, he was somewhat interested in the ravine that suddenly appeared 800 years ago. According to the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon realm, the current difficult situation in the cultivation world began when the ravine appeared. The ravine lay there. It seemed to have no effect on the Soaring Dragon realm, but it seemed to have a subtle force that constantly lowered the upper limit of the cultivators in the entire world. Each generation was worse than the previous. Lu Yi couldn't figure out the reason behind this, but he could faintly feel that he would not be able to avoid this strange ravine on this trip to the secret realm of the Soaring Dragon realm. Looking up, he indeed saw a huge mark on the horizon. It was as if the sky had been torn apart. It also looked like a dark centipede crawling on the sky. The cracks around the ravine were like the limbs of the centipede. Lu Yi suddenly said, "Don't you think this ravine looks a little familiar?" How could Lu Yi not see it? He turned his head and glanced at Yi Lioli, who was sleeping in Yi's arms. A thoughtful look flashed across his eyes. The ravine that lay across the horizon was indeed familiar because its shape was exactly the same as the birthmark on Yi Lioli's back. Even the corresponding number and position of the centipede's limbs were exactly the same. It was just that one was incomparably huge, and the other was just a birthmark. Could there be such a coincidence in this world? If it was really a coincidence, then so be it. The key was that as they traveled north these few days, Yi Lioli's condition became increasingly worse. As a cultivator of the Cloud River realm, she gradually became addicted to sleep. She would sleep for most of the day. This was obviously not normal. Lu Yi only glanced at the birthmark on Yi Lioli's back, but with his eyesight and memory he naturally couldn't forget it. Was it really a coincidence? But if it wasn't a coincidence, what did the birthmark on Yi Lioli's back have to do with this ravine? Lu Yi couldn't understand. Although he hadn't been in the Soaring Dragon realm for long, he had a feeling that the entire Soaring Dragon realm was full of secrets, and there was a faint sense of crisis. This sense of crisis grew stronger as he continued to move forward. Suddenly, a fluctuation of spirit energy came from the side. Lu Yi turned his head to look and saw a stream of light moving around a large ship spirit artifact. From time to time, he would activate his spirit artifact to attack the ship, but he was blocked by the cultivators on the ship. The aura flowing around the stream of light was that of a Cloud River Realm 9th Order. However, this person seemed to be seriously injured as his aura was fluctuating. Therefore, even if the cultivators on the ship's spirit artifact were weaker than him, this person couldn't do anything for a while. However, he didn't retreat. Instead, he pretended to attack while shouting, "Bastards of the Heaven Ravine sect, how dare you commit such evil deeds? Just wait for your sect to be destroyed, cough cough cough." As he shouted, he vomited a large mouthful of blood as if he was about to die. The Heaven Ravine sect. Lu Yi recalled for a moment and had a vague impression of this force. It seemed to be a group of relatively stubborn cultivators whose purpose was to comprehend the mysteries of the Heaven Ravine. They always felt that the mysteries contained in the Heaven Ravine were the only way out for the cultivators of the Soaring Dragon realm. The entire Soaring Dragon realm didn't have a good impression of the Heaven Ravine sect. However, because the Heaven Ravine sect was full of masters, and they were only active within the Snow Province, it was very difficult for ordinary cultivators to come into contact with them. Unexpectedly, he met them here. Lu Yi wasn't willing to intervene in the battles between cultivators. After all, he didn't know who was right and who was wrong. If he rashly interfered, he would only cause trouble for himself. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly looked at the cabin of the ship. There was a window there, and it seemed to be the bottom of the ship. Through the window, he saw many figures gathered together. What surprised him was that these people were actually mortals who had never cultivated before. All of them looked desperate and frightened, and many of them seemed to be injured. The battles between cultivators rarely involved mortals. This was the case for both the Soaring Dragon realm and the 9 provinces. No matter what, cultivators started as mortals. If there were no mortals, where would cultivators come from? In the 9 provinces, there were a large number of mortals living in the territories of the various sects. Every sect had the responsibility to protect the mortals in their territories because the continuation of the sect's inheritance depended on selecting excellent disciples from these mortals. The large number of mortals in the cabin of the ship looked like they had been kidnapped. Otherwise, they wouldn't look so terrified. Lu Yi vaguely understood what had happened when he recalled the words of the 9th Order cultivator who was coughing up blood. This Heaven Ravine sect? What were they trying to do? Even a rabbit wouldn't eat the grass near its burrow. Their roots were in the Snow Province, but now they had kidnapped so many mortals. Were they not afraid that the news would spread and the 3 overlord sects would join forces to annihilate them? This kind of thing had happened in the Soaring Dragon realm before. There was once an evil sect that didn't care about the lives of mortals and wantonly massacred them. In the end, the 3 overlord sects took action and the vast evil sect was annihilated overnight. However, no matter what they were doing, it was obviously not a good thing. The 9th Order cultivator who was coughing up blood must have encountered this matter and wanted to intervene, but because of his serious injuries, he was unable to do so. "Stay here and don't move," Lu Yi instructed before rushing out of the spirit ship and heading in that direction. If it was just a battle between cultivators, he wouldn't be bothered to intervene, but since some mortals were involved, he couldn't just sit back and watch. Back then, he was also rescued from Evil Moon Valley by the cultivators of Grand Heaven Alliance. Step by step, he had reached where he was today. His speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, He was within 3 kilometers of the battlefield. The cultivator who was coughing up blood seemed to have noticed him and turned his head to look at him. A vigilant look immediately appeared in his eyes. He was currently in a bad state, otherwise, he would have already broken through the defenses of the ship. Suddenly, someone appeared at this time. Who knew if this person was from Heaven Canyon sect? After all, this was Heaven Canyon sect's territory. Looking at Lu Ye's cultivation, he was only a 6th order Cloud River Realm cultivator, so there was nothing to be afraid of. While he was vigilant, Lu Ye arrived in front of him. What made him feel relieved was that Lu Ye didn't have any hostility. He just stood in the direction of the ship and stared at it. He's a friend, not an enemy. The cultivator immediately made a judgment and shouted, "Little brother, I don't know why Heaven Canyon sect has kidnapped a large number of mortals. It seems that they want to send them to the north. Let's work together to break their turtle shell and rescue them first." But Lu Ye responded and pulled out the mountain ascending saber from his waist. He swung it forward fiercely. Seeing this, the 9th order cultivator said, "This spirit ship has a protective spirit array. Little brother, don't waste your strength. Let's work together." Before he could finish, Lu Ye had already swung his saber. Under this strike, the protective light curtain that enveloped the entire spirit ship shook violently. It was as if a stone had been thrown into a calm lake. Ripples spread out wildly. This scene startled the cultivator. He was a 9th order cultivator. Even if he couldn't use his full strength, it was impossible for him to be weaker than a 6th order cultivator. However, he hadn't caused such a big disturbance in his previous attacks. Moreover, in his opinion, Lu Ye's attack wasn't too powerful. It didn't make sense for it to have such an obvious effect. To be continued. Chapter 700. The only way to achieve twice the result with half the effort was to attack the nodes of the spirit array. However, the nodes of any spirit array were constantly changing according to the flow of spirit chi. Even for array cultivators, it was not easy to deduce the location of the nodes. It was even more difficult to deduce the nodes and attack at the same time. Is this saber-wielding brat really that lucky? Did he hit the nodes with just one slash? Just as this person was thinking this, Lu Ye slashed a second time. An even more violent movement was heard, and the protective light curtain above the spirit ship rippled even more violently. Even the spirit ship shook violently. The few Heaven Canyon sect cultivators standing on the deck didn't put Lu Ye in their eyes. Although they didn't have any decent masters on this trip, they had a lot of people, 7 or 8 of them. What they were afraid of was the 9th order cultivator coughing blood. Even if he looked like he was about to die, who knew if he was real? Moreover, even if he was seriously injured, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Therefore, when faced with the provocation of this cultivator coughing blood, they just hid on the spirit ship and didn't dare to act rashly. Who would have thought that a 6th order cultivator would cause such a big disturbance in the spirit ship's protective spirit array? For a moment, the cultivators on the deck couldn't stand still. A fierce-looking male cultivator with a long scar on his face shouted, "Where did this brat come from? How dare you meddle in the affairs of my Heaven Canyon sect in Snow Province? Leave immediately, or you will die without a burial place." Someone else also shouted, "We have already contacted the sect's elders. Just wait for your death." As soon as these words came out, Lu Ye didn't care, but the man coughing blood looked worried. He wasn't afraid, but worried that if they delayed for too long, the masters of Heaven Canyon sect would arrive, and the abducted mortals wouldn't be able to be saved. He was more worried that Lu Ye would be afraid and leave. After all, in Snow Province, Heaven Canyon sect was very famous, and no one dared to provoke them. Turning his head, he saw that Lu Ye had already slashed a 3rd time. There seemed to be a shattering sound in the depths of their hearts, and a crack appeared on the spirit ship's protective spirit array. The cultivators of the Heavenly Gorge sect who had been yelling incessantly were terrified by this scene, and their expressions all changed. On the contrary, the man coughing up blood couldn't help but clap his hands and laugh. Good. At this point, how could he not see that Lu Ye wasn't just lucky? Instead, he had really seen through the nodes of the array, and every slash of his blade had landed on the nodes. This person must be an extremely brilliant array cultivator. Otherwise, there was no reason for him to have such ability. However, he racked his brains and compared the famous array cultivators in his mind with the person in front of him, but he could not find any similarities. He could not understand when such a person had appeared in the soaring dragon realm. His cultivation was not high, but his array skills were ridiculously high. Seeing that Lu Yi was about to unleash his fourth strike, the scarred man on the spirit ship gnashed his teeth and shouted, "Brat, you're really courting death." As soon as he finished speaking, he rushed towards Lu Yi. The protective spirit formation only protected the outside but not the inside. He could kill his way out. Seeing how powerful Lu Yi's methods were, he could no longer sit still and was prepared to kill Lu Yi before retreating. His confidence came from his seventh order cultivation. Not good. The cultivator coughing up blood was thinking about Lu Yi's identity, but he did not expect Heaven Canyon sect to respond in such a way. His figure flickered and he was about to rush over to help, but he was already seriously injured. The sudden attack made him feel like his whole body was about to fall apart. His vision darkened and he almost fell from the sky. When he came back to his senses and looked again, he found it unbelievable. That was because the boy with the saber was still standing alone in front of the spirit ship. Not far in front of him, blood splattered as a head flew off and a headless corpse fell from the sky. Huh? What happened? The man coughing up blood thought that Lu Yi would be defeated, but he never expected that Lu Yi would kill the scarred cultivator just because his vision darkened. How did he do it? He did not see the scene of Lu Yi killing the enemy, but the Heaven Canyon sect cultivators saw it clearly. One slash. With just one slash, the scarred man, who was the strongest among them, was decapitated. This scene deeply shocked them because even a Cloud River Realm 9th Order cultivator would not be able to do it so cleanly. They were really unlucky. They had been sent out to carry out such a mission. It was fine that they encountered the 9th Order cultivator coughing up blood. That cultivator was strong on the outside but weak on the inside, so there was nothing to be afraid of. But who was this boy with the saber? The saber flashed and slashed down again. Kata. Spiderweb-like cracks instantly appeared on the light curtain of the protective array. Then, with a crash, it shattered. The Heaven Canyon sect disciples protected by the array were instantly exposed to the saber. The man coughing up blood flew over, and Lu Yi also attacked with his saber. How could the Heaven Canyon sect cultivators resist the joint attack of the two? They were all killed in a moment. The man coughing up blood sat on the deck with blood flowing from the corner of his mouth, but he still looked up at Lu Yi with a look of approval. "Little brother, you did well. How should I address you?" Lu Yi cupped his fists. "Feng Province Yi Lu." "Little brother Yi." The man coughing up blood nodded slightly and saluted back with difficulty. "Qi Province, Zhuangbu Fan." As he introduced himself, he glanced at Lu Ye's expression, but he saw that Lu Ye's expression was calm, as if he had never heard of this name before. Zhuangbu Fan immediately concluded that this little brat was a greenhorn. Otherwise, it was impossible for him not to have heard of his name. Thief God Zhuangbu Fan was a famous figure in the entire Soaring Dragon realm. Anyone with a bit of knowledge would have heard of him. "Brother Yi, there is one more thing I must trouble you with," Zhuangbu Fan said softly. Lu Yi understood. "Do you want me to release those mortals?" He had some respect for this Zhuangbu Fan. Zhuangbu Fan was already seriously injured, but when he saw the mortals suffering, he still jumped out to stop them. It was obvious that he was a kind person. Zhuangbu Fan nodded. "Indeed. A small matter." Saying so, Lu Yi walked into the cabin and found the central spirit array that controlled the spirit ship. A moment later, under his control, the spirit ship floated to the ground. While he was busy here, Zhuangbu Fan had already walked into the hold and released the mortals who had been captured. At the same time, he also inquired about some information from them. The results of his inquiry made Zhuangbu Fan's heart heavy. "Go, leave this place, leave the Snow Province, go live somewhere else." On the deck, Zhuangbu Fan waved to the mortals who were kowtowing to him. There were more than 400 people released. Among them were some young people. Although they had lost their homes, as long as they supported each other, they could still leave the snow province. If possible, Zhuangbu Fan would be more willing to send them out of the snow province, but if he really did so, it would only bring disaster to them. Watching a large group of old and young people leave, Zhuangbu Fan turned his head to look at Lu Yi. "Brother Yi, farewell." Lu Yi nodded slightly. After a while, Zhuangbu Fan was stunned. "Why are you still here?" Lu Yi said, "Brother Zhuang, why are you still here?" Zhuangbu Fan coughed a few times. "My injuries are serious, I need to take a breather before I leave." Lu Yi couldn't help but laugh. He felt that this person was a little funny. He shook his head slightly, jumped off the deck, and began to set up spirit arrays around. Zhuangbu Fan poked his head out from the deck and asked curiously, "Brother Yi, what are you doing?" Lu Yi didn't even raise his head. "Brother Zhuang's injuries are not light, it's best for you to recuperate. Otherwise, you'll die first before dying at the hands of the enemy." Zhuangbu Fan's expression became solemn. "Since little brother has noticed, you shouldn't stay here any longer. The elders of Heaven Canyon sect are definitely ninth order, you are not their opponent." Saying so, he looked up towards the place where Yi and Yi Lioli were standing. "There are still people waiting for you over there, don't make them sad." "So, I'm setting up a spirit array." Zhuangbu Fan was speechless for a while. Although he had inferred that Lu Ye's attainments in the spirit array Dao were not low, in the end, it was only an inference. He had never seen Lu Ye's methods with his own eyes, so he didn't know what Lu Ye's attainments in the spirit array Dao were. However, Lu Ye's calmness at this moment gave him some confidence. "Perhaps things aren't as bad as I thought?" Thinking of this, Zhuangbu Fan said, "I have already sent a message to a few friends about the evil deeds committed by Heaven Canyon sect. They will find a way to contact the Imperial Heaven sect, Vajra Temple, and Howran Academy. I believe that in a few days, the three great sects will take action. So, as long as we can stop the pursuers, those mortals will have a chance to escape. Brother Yi, tell me, how confident are you?" The reason why he didn't personally escort those mortals out of Snow Province was that the dead Heaven Canyon sect cultivators had already sent a message to a certain Heaven Canyon sect elder, and the pursuers could arrive at any time. Since the elder was a ninth order cultivator, he would definitely be a ninth order cultivator. When the battle broke out, countless mortals would be killed or injured even if they hid in the cabin. However, he couldn't leave just like that, or the people he rescued would soon be captured. He didn't tell Lu Yi about this and planned to stay here alone to stop the pursuers of Heaven Canyon sect. Since he was already involved in this matter, there was no reason to give up halfway. But he didn't expect that Lu Yi would see through his thoughts even though he didn't say anything. What a warm-hearted young man. Zhuangbu Fan didn't want to implicate Lu Yi even more. "If I say 100%, would Brother Zhuang believe me?" Lu Yi asked while setting up the spirit array. Zhuangbu Fan fell back to the deck and leaned against the wall of the ship. He took out a bottle of wine and took a sip before laughing. "I believe you." Lu Yi didn't need to set up a spirit array to deal with a ninth order cultivator, but under the premise of not knowing how many enemies there would be, setting up a spirit array was undoubtedly the safest way. When the time came, even if a few dozen people from Heaven Canyon sect fell into the spirit array, Lu Yi would be able to kill them all. In just over an hour, the spirit array had been set up. Lu Yi flew to the deck, and Yi had already brought Yi Lioli over under his orders. Zhuangbu Fan looked at Lu Yi, then at Yi and Yi Lioli. Obviously, he misunderstood something and sighed, "It's good to be young." He took another sip of wine. The era that belonged to him had passed. Fortunately, there would be new talents in every generation, each leading the way for hundreds of years. Unfortunately, I won't be able to see it. To be continued. Chapter 701. Half an hour later, Zhuangbu Fan, who was taking a nap on the deck, suddenly opened his eyes and looked in a certain direction. He shouted in a low voice, "He's here." At the same time, Lu Yi, who was standing not far away from him, also saw a stream of light flying over from the horizon. There was only one stream of light, but judging from its speed and aura fluctuations, it was a Cloud River Ninth Order cultivator. Moreover, the aura it exuded was much stronger than an ordinary Cloud River Ninth Order cultivator. Zhuang Bufan focused his vision and his expression turned solemn. It's Sun Qi. This Sun Qi was born in Gan Province's 100 Battles sect. His talent was extraordinary, but his appearance was ugly. When he was young, he loved his junior sister but failed. More than 30 years ago, on the day of his junior sister's wedding, he killed the groom and humiliated the bride, betraying the sect. 20 years ago, he reached the Ninth Order Cloud River realm and brazenly returned to Gan Province to destroy the 100 Battles sect. However, his first impression was that Lu Yi was just a fledgling who was providing him with information about the enemy. Strictly speaking, the Heavenly Gorge sect was actually an evil sect. There were all sorts of people in this sect, and they hid and tolerated evil. There were traitors who had betrayed the sect, villains who had committed all sorts of evil deeds, and people who had offended experts and were driven into a corner. However, for so many years, the Heavenly Gorge sect had only been entrenched in the Snow Province and showed no signs of expansion. Moreover, the cultivators of the sect basically did not leave the Snow Province. Therefore, even the three overlord sects did not want to start a war with them. This Sun Qi had cultivated to the Ninth Order Cloud River realm 20 years ago, so after 20 years of accumulation, such a character must be extremely strong. Even if Lu Yi wasn't injured, it was impossible for him to be Sun Qi's opponent. Yang Kai didn't know if Lu Yi had the confidence to defeat him. However, when he thought of how busy this little brother named Sixth Yi was in setting up the spirit array and looked at his calm expression, Zhuang Bufan calmed down a lot. Just as these thoughts were surging in his mind, a man with an ugly face and a figure that was as thin as firewood had already flashed over 100 meters away. He did not come here on an artifact. Instead, he flew here directly. Since he had rushed here so quickly, he must be nearby. As soon as he arrived, he saw the spirit ship docked on the deck and the bloodstains on the deck. Then he looked inside the ship, but there was no aura of any living beings. His expression darkened. So, you're the ones who killed the cultivators of the Heavenly Gorge Church? Lu Yi did not speak, but Zhuang Bufan, who was at the side, cried out weakly, I killed him. Sun Qi glanced at him and snorted, a stray dog dares to clamor. He didn't know why Zhuang Bufan looked so heavily injured, but among the people present, Zhuang Bufan's cultivation was the highest. With such injuries, he could easily kill him. As for Lu Yi and the others, he didn't care about them at all. However, when his gaze swept past Yi and Yilioli, his eyes lit up slightly. He broke into a savage grin. Not bad, there's an unexpected gain. He felt uncomfortable from his smile and couldn't help but lean closer to Lu Yi and whisper, this person is so ugly. Like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, Sun Qi flew into a rage. What did you say? Among cultivators, there were very few who cared about their appearance. The higher the cultivation, the more this was the case. But then again, cultivators, regardless of whether they were men or women, would not be too ugly. This was because as their cultivation increased, their spiritual power would nourish their physical bodies. Men would become more dignified, while women would have delicate skin and maintain their youthful looks. He had seen thousands of cultivators with Lu Yi, but this was the first time she had seen someone as ugly as Sun Qi. At first glance, this person looked like a toad's head on a bamboo pole. He was so ugly that it was as if the sky was the limit. However, Sun Qi cared about his appearance the most. He was extremely talented. Back then, he was quite favored by his master in the sect. However, because of his natural ugliness, even his beloved junior sister was betrothed to someone else by his master. Therefore, he killed the man who was going to marry his junior sister and got her in his own way. 10 years later, when his cultivation had reached a high level, he returned to the sect and destroyed it in a battle. He made a name for himself. After that, he was chased by the great monks of the Jingang Temple for 3 months. He was forced to flee to the Snow Province and join the Heavenly Gorge sect. This time, he came here with a heavy responsibility, but he didn't expect his good fortune to be ruined. Someone even said he was ugly in front of him? How could he tolerate this? He hid behind Lu Yi and made a face at him. Ugly people are always mischievous. I'll kill you. Sun Qi roared, and his whole face became ferocious. The spiritual power around him surged, and he rushed toward the spirit ship. "Be careful!" Zhuang Bufan shouted in a low voice. However, at this moment he had no room to make a move, so he could only remind him in a low voice. Just as Sun Qi was about to move, a formation flag appeared in Lu Ye's hand and he waved it gently. Sun Qi, who was rushing toward Yi with his teeth bared and claws bared, suddenly looked stunned. Then, his whole body seemed to be pressed down by a mountain, and his body fell down uncontrollably. He reacted quickly and immediately understood what had happened to him. A forbidden sky array? It was creepy. How could there be a forbidden sky array in this damned place? It should be known that in the entire Soaring Dragon realm, only a few array masters were qualified to set up a forbidden sky array, and it would take a lot of time. If there was a forbidden sky array here, didn't that mean that one of those people had made a move? And which of those array masters did not have a powerful backer behind them? If one of them made a move, it naturally meant that their backer had also made a move. While his mind was racing, Sun Qi's body fell to a position only 10 meters above the ground, and the huge pressure on his shoulders suddenly disappeared without a trace. Before he could catch his breath, Lu Yi waved the formation flag in his hand again, and in an instant, the fog rolled over and shrouded his body. Lu Yi stepped out from the deck, his expression relaxed as he walked into the mist. Zhuang Bufan leaned against the wall of the ship with difficulty and poked his head out to look. All he could see was the fog surging in his field of vision, making it impossible to see the situation inside. Only the faint sounds of fighting and the fluctuations of spiritual power could be heard from inside, causing the fog to surge even more fiercely. A moment later, accompanied by a shrill scream, everything calmed down. Who won? Zhuang Bufan's heart skipped a beat. Immediately afterwards, he saw Lu Ye's figure walk out of the fog with a leisurely look on his face. Even his aura hadn't changed in the slightest. Looking at his posture, it didn't look like he had just fought with a Cloud River 9th Order cultivator, but rather had gone to a nearby river to catch a fish. Sun Qi, who even Zhuang Bufan was afraid of, was now like a dead fish in Lu Ye's hand, his body covered in wounds and his aura completely extinguished. Dead? Zhuang Bufan was shocked to the extreme. He died just like that? He almost wondered if he had recognized the wrong person. Perhaps that wasn't Sun Qi? Was it someone else? But besides Sun Qi, which other Cloud River 9th Order cultivator was so ugly? Moreover, whether he was Sun Qi or not, he was still a Cloud River 9th Order cultivator. He had actually died just like that. Thinking back to the spirit array Lu Yi had used before, Zhuang Bufan was shocked. A forbidden sky array, a bewildering array, a trapping array, and a few killing arrays. In just a short 2 hours, he was able to set up such an arrangement. Just how high was this little brother Yi Lu's attainments in the array Dao? As far as he knew, even the famous array masters in the Soaring Dragon realm wouldn't be able to arrange a forbidden sky array so easily. No wonder this little brother had been so calm from the beginning to the end, not putting the enemy in his eyes at all. Zhuang Bufan had thought that this little brother was just a newborn calf that wasn't afraid of a tiger, but now he knew that this little brother had confidence. Well done, Zhuang Bufan praised. In any case, the current crisis had been resolved. The Heavenly Gully sect had inexplicably lost Sun Qi, so they most likely wouldn't dare to act rashly in the near future. As such, the hundreds of mortals they had saved before would have a chance to escape. But thinking of the information he had obtained from the Heaven Ravine sect cultivators, Zhuang Bufan couldn't help but feel heavy. Because according to the information, Heaven Ravine sect had captured more than just this group of mortals. There were other groups that were abducting mortals from other places. Perhaps the entire Snow Province had been affected. He could intervene when he encountered this group of mortals, but he couldn't do anything about the others. He only hoped that the 3 major sects could react quickly and take action. Otherwise, the Snow Province would have many more deaths. Brother Zhuang, are you going to the Medicine Valley? Lu Yefei got on the deck and asked Zhuang Bufan. This wasn't difficult to guess. Zhuang Bufan's injuries and his appearance in the Snow Province meant that he was going to the Medicine Valley to seek treatment from the fairy doctor. Sure enough, Zhuang Bufan nodded and said, I'm going to the Medicine Valley. Brother Yi, are you? He glanced at Yi Lioli, who had been unconscious since just now. Then let's go together. I'll give you a ride. Lu Yefei nodded. Zhuang Bufan was overjoyed. Then I'll have to trouble you, Brother Yi. In his current state, it would be troublesome for him to rush to the Medicine Valley. It would be best if he could get help. He sighed in his heart. Good people are rewarded. Little Brother Yi, whom he met by chance, was indeed a warm-hearted person. A moment later, 2 streams of light rose into the sky. Yi drove her flying spiritual weapon to carry Yi Lioli, while Lu Yefei carried Zhuang Bufan all the way to the Medicine Valley. Zhuang Bufan was undoubtedly more familiar with the terrain of the Snow Province. With him leading the way, it saved a lot of time. After all, Lu Yefei only knew that the Medicine Valley was in the Snow Province, but he didn't know the exact location of the Snow Province. While moving forward, Zhuang Bufan had been closing his eyes to rest and heal his injuries. Lu Yefei didn't say anything and just hurried on. After half a day, they arrived at the Medicine Valley. The Snow Province was located in the extreme north. Compared to other provinces, the environment was generally bitter and cold. However, the Medicine Valley was like spring all year round. Birds were singing and flowers were fragrant. Moreover, the spiritual qi here was extremely rich. There seemed to be an excellent spiritual vein underground. This was also the reason why the little fairy doctor had settled down here. She had been treating the injuries of the cultivators in the Soaring Dragon realm all year round and needed to consume a lot of medicinal herbs. Although some of the cultivators who came to seek treatment would offer free medicinal herbs, there were still some spiritual herbs that could not be bought outside. However, the Medicine Valley had everything. To be continued. Chapter 702. The Medicine Valley was located in a valley surrounded by mountains on 3 sides. Looking at it from the sky, Lu Yi could not help but think of Huitian Valley. In terms of scenery, Huitian Valley was one of the best in the entire Cloud River battlefield. However, the scenery in the Medicine Valley seemed to be more beautiful than Huitian Valley. The entire Medicine Valley was divided into medicine fields, where many spiritual flowers and herbs were planted. There were also medicine apprentices busily working in the fields. In the center of the Medicine Valley, there were more than 10 scattered thatched huts. Those were the residences of the Medicine Valley's owner and medicine apprentices. Something's not right, Zhuang Bufan, who was behind Lu Yi, suddenly said. Lu Yi also noticed that something was wrong. At the entrance of the Medicine Valley, there seemed to be many cultivators confronting each other. It seemed that a battle had broken out. There were bloodstains on the ground and 2 corpses lying on the side. This scene surprised Zhuang Bufan greatly. This was because everyone who came to the Medicine Valley for treatment was either severely injured or suffering from some incurable disease. The fairy doctor also had an unwritten rule that no one was allowed to fight within the boundaries of the Medicine Valley. Anyone who broke this rule, no matter who it was, would not be treated by her. Therefore, for so many years, no one had ever dared to fight outside the Medicine Valley. Every cultivator who came here abided by the little fairy doctor's rule. Regardless of whether they were vicious bandits or evil cultivators, they could only restrain themselves when they came here. The Medicine Valley alone was not very powerful. Although the little fairy doctor's strength was not weak, she was alone. Few of her medicine apprentices had high cultivation. However, for so many years, many cultivators had been treated by her. Even in those top sects, there were many who were indebted to her for saving their lives. It could be said that the little fairy doctor's network of connections covered the entire dragon soaring realm. Therefore, even if the Medicine Valley was not a big force, no one dared to have any ideas about it over the years. Even the Heaven Canyon sect in the Snow Province turned a blind eye to the Medicine Valley and minded their own business. There were even cultivators from the Heaven Canyon sect who came to seek treatment from time to time. After all, as a cultivator who had not been injured, sometimes they could recover by taking some healing pills. If the healing pills did not work, they could only seek help from medical practitioners. There was no benefit in offending a medical practitioner. Not to mention the dragon soaring realm, Even the 9 states had some special treatment for medical cultivators. Even if the cultivators of the 2 camps captured the medical cultivators of the other side, they would not make things too difficult for them. They could even pay a certain amount of ransom to redeem the captured medical cultivators. Therefore, the confrontation between the cultivators outside the Medicine Valley was extremely inconceivable to Zhuang Bufan. Lu Yi did not know the fairy doctor's rules and was not surprised. If there was no conflict between cultivators, then they were not cultivators. Just as he was about to fly over, a cultivator shouted from afar, "The Heavenly Gorge sect is on business. Halt! Violators will be killed without mercy." It was the Heaven Gorge sect again. Zhuang Bufan frowned. For so many years, Tianhe's sect had occupied the Snow Province and gathered a large number of cultivators. However, they had never left the Snow Province and only focused on comprehending the mysteries of Tianhe. However, the Heavenly Gorge sect had first abducted mortals, and now they had come to the Medicine Valley to stop people from seeking medical treatment. What on earth were they trying to do? Vaguely, Zhuang Bufan felt that the world was about to change. Unlike outsiders like Lu Yi, Zhuang Bufan was a native of the Dragon Soaring Realm. As a 9th Order cultivator, he was naturally more sensitive to the changes in the Dragon Soaring Realm than Lu Yi. There were many Heavenly Gorge sect cultivators blocking the way, about 30 to 40 of them. There were about a dozen cultivators confronting them, and most of them were injured. These cultivators were obviously here to seek medical treatment, but they were blocked by the Heavenly Gorge sect cultivators. This was the reason for the confrontation between the 2 sides. However, it seemed that some people were dissatisfied and wanted to force their way through, but they were killed by the Heavenly Gorge sect. Although the cultivators seeking medical treatment were filled with righteous indignation and felt that the Heavenly Gorge sect was overbearing, they did not dare to say anything. Lu Yi pressed down and landed outside the Medicine Valley with he and the others. Zhuang Bufan staggered slightly and sighed secretly. His face was full of worry. The Medicine Valley was blocked by the Heavenly Gorge sect. What should he do? He could not afford to delay his treatment with his current injuries. It was obviously irrational to force his way through. Although he dared to block the Heavenly Gorge sect's spirit ship before, that was a private matter. Now he was in public. If he offended the Heavenly Gorge sect, he would not be able to leave Snow Province even if the little fairy doctor could cure him. "We are here to seek help from the little fairy doctor. Why is your Heavenly Gorge sect blocking our way?" Someone shouted. "That's right. The Medicine Valley belongs to the little fairy doctor, not your Heavenly Gorge sect." "Fellow Taoist, can you make an exception and let us enter the Medicine Valley for treatment?" "Fellow Taoist, don't worry. We won't delay your sex matters." Senior brother, what's wrong?" "Senior brother, don't die," the group of cultivators clamored, and the situation became chaotic. The leader of the Heavenly Gorge sect cultivators was dressed in black and had a cold expression. He was the one who had shouted for Lu Yi to stop when he saw him coming. This person had his hands behind his back and did not put the cultivators who came to seek medical treatment in his eyes. Dan said, "Those who dare to trespass will be killed without mercy." A young and aggressive cultivator was annoyed. "Your Heavenly Gorge sect is too unreasonable." As soon as he finished speaking, the older senior brother next to him covered his mouth. The black-clothed cultivator sneered. "Reason? This father is here to reason. If you want to reason with me, you have to win against this father first." He suddenly frowned and looked at Lu Yi, who was walking out from behind the crowd, and grinned. "What do you want?" "McWay." Lu Yi looked straight at him and kept walking. Zhuang Bufan broke out in a cold sweat. Only now did he realize that Lu Yi, who was beside him a moment ago, had walked out. This little brother was too bold. Previously, he could kill Sun Qi because of the power of the spirit array. Now, the Heavenly Gorge sect had the advantage in numbers, and the black-clothed cultivator was an 8th Order cultivator. How could he fight them head-on? He was secretly anxious, but he could only grit his teeth and keep up with Lu Yi. He made up his mind that if things went wrong, he would have to use his divine armament. Even if he would die after using it, he couldn't just stand by and watch such a warm-hearted little brother die here. Finally, another one who isn't afraid of death. The smile on the black-clothed cultivator's face became more and more ferocious. He raised his hand and grabbed a long spear from the storage bag at his waist. Pushing his spirit chi, the long spear bloomed and shot straight at Lu Yi. He shouted, "Die!" The sound of a sword rang out, and a dazzling light flashed. The black-clothed cultivator's face suddenly changed. He didn't put Lu Yi in his eyes. When Lu Yi flew over on his artifact, he secretly checked Lu Ye's cultivation. Lu Yi was only a 6th-order Cloud River Realm cultivator. With his cultivation, he naturally didn't care too much. Originally, he wanted to kill this arrogant brat to shut up the noisy people around him, but as soon as Lu Yi took out his sword, he felt that something was wrong. An indescribable sense of oppression hit him head-on, making his skin tighten. Accompanying that sense of oppression was a powerful and aggressive aura. It was as if he was the one with the lower cultivation. With a few clanking sounds, the black-clothed cultivator screamed. The ferocious smile on his face had long disappeared and was replaced by deep shock. At this moment, in the huge collision, the web between his thumb and index finger had cracked and blood was flowing out. His aura and spirit chi were in chaos. He raised his long spear high and opened his eyes wide. In his vision, a sword light flashed, and his whole body froze in place. His eyes widened, and an expression of disbelief appeared on his face. In the silence, a small line of blood appeared on his neck. Then, blood spurted out and his head flew. Cries of surprise rang out. The cultivators of Heaven Canyon sect and those who came to the Medicine Valley for medical treatment were all dumbfounded. The collision between an 8th order and a 6th order cultivator was indeed a battle that could determine victory or defeat in a very short time, but the result was unexpected. The one who died was the black-clothed cultivator with a higher cultivation. How could this happen? Not to mention the cultivators who didn't know Lu Yi, even Zhuangbu Fan was in disbelief. He was originally worried that Lu Yi would suffer a loss at the hands of the black-clothed cultivator and was prepared to rescue him if the situation went wrong. Who would have thought that this little brother named Yi Lu would kill the black-clothed cultivator with just a few slashes? Am I dreaming? Previously, when Lu Yi set up a spirit array to kill Sun Qi, he only saw Lu Ye's terrifying attainments in the Tao of Arrays. Now, he saw Lu Ye's strength. He killed an 8th order cultivator so easily. In other words, this little brother could compete with a 9th order cultivator. Since ancient times, there had never been such a character in the soaring dragon realm. Which great master taught this disciple? While Zhuangbu Fan's thoughts were in turmoil, Lu Yi had already rushed towards the Heaven Canyon sect disciples. After saving the ship of mortals, Lu Yi had a very bad impression of Heaven Canyon sect cultivators. He also had a rough idea of what kind of people these cultivators were. Coupled with the fact that they were blocking his way, Lu Yi didn't hesitate to kill them. He couldn't be wrong to kill them. While Lu Yi was attacking, Eaton naturally didn't stay idle. Her spirit energy surged as she sent a series of spirit techniques into the crowd. "Kill them!" someone roared. Although they didn't want to offend Heaven Canyon sect, those who came to the Medicine Valley to seek medical treatment were all people who didn't have long to live. If they couldn't see the little fairy doctor, they would lose their lives. How could they still care about Heaven Canyon sect? They didn't dare to act rashly before. First, they were a sheet of loose sand. Second, their strength was indeed inferior. Some of them had already died at the hands of Heaven Canyon sect. They should learn from their mistakes. Now that Lu Yi had stepped forward, driven by their survival instincts, many cultivators obeyed. Before the Heaven Canyon sect cultivators could recover from the shock of the black-clothed cultivator's death, they were attacked head-on. Several more died in an instant. In addition, Lu Yi rushed into the crowd of enemies. Everywhere he went, blood rained down. The scene instantly turned into a mess. To be continued. Chapter 703. In the center of the Medicine Valley, there were a dozen scattered straw huts. These were the residences of the Medicine Valley's owner and the medicine apprentices. In the middle straw hut, A stalwart man with shoulder-length black hair and an unruly temperament was standing in front of a woman. He had an impatient look on his face as he said, "If I respect you, I call you the little fairy doctor. If I look down on you, so what if I flatten your Medicine Valley?" The leader of the Heaven Canyon sect's blockade of the Medicine Valley was naturally not the 8th Order cultivator who was killed by Lu Yi. Such a big matter was not something an 8th Order cultivator could handle. Therefore, the leader this time was the 9th Elder of the Heaven Canyon sect, Wu Xie. There were many elders in the Heaven Canyon sect, and all of them were 9th Order Cloud River Realm cultivators. It was said that they were ranked in the top 50. The ranking of these elders was not fixed. The higher the ranking of the cultivators, the stronger they were. With dozens of elders, all of them were 9th Order Cloud River Realm cultivators. Who would feel that they were weaker than others? Therefore, the ranking of the elders in the Heaven Canyon sect would often change. However, the top 10 elders had never changed. The first elder to the 10th elder could be said to be the mainstay of the entire Heaven Canyon sect. They would not be mobilized for no reason. This time, for the little fairy doctor, Wu Xie, who was ranked 9th, had personally come. It could be said that he had given them a lot of face. He wanted to invite the little fairy doctor back to the headquarters of the Heaven Canyon sect. In the past, the Heaven Canyon sect and the Medicine Valley had not interfered with each other because the little fairy doctor had too many connections. If they really offended the little fairy doctor, the Heaven Canyon sect would be in a terrible situation. But now, the sect was planning something big. Regardless of success or failure, the entire Heaven Canyon sect would stand on the opposite side of the soaring dragon cultivation world. When that time came, there would be many people coming to the Snow Province to encircle and annihilate them. When the war started, casualties were inevitable. If the little fairy doctor and her medicine apprentices were here, they could also heal the injured Heaven Canyon sect cultivators in time. In fact, whether the little fairy doctor agreed or not, he was going to take her away. As expected, the little fairy doctor did not agree to his request. This made Wu Xie quite impatient. After a few words, he was already angry. A gentle voice sounded, "This is just a place for living people to treat illnesses. I am also a doctor. 9th Elder, why do you have to show off in front of me? Little fairy doctor, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. You should know what kind of person I, Wu Xie, am. Since the sect leader sent me here to deal with this matter, you should know the consequences of rejecting me. Today, even if it's just your corpse, I will bring it back. Who doesn't experience life and death? Even in the face of the suppressed anger of a Cloud River 9th Order cultivator, the little fairy doctor remained calm and collected, only minding her own business as she sorted out the herbs in front of her meticulously. Very good. The corners of Wu Xie's mouth curled up and a cold smile appeared on his face. He had already made up his mind. Since he could not bring the fairy doctor back alive, he could at least bring a dead one back. This was also the original intention of the sect leader when he sent him to deal with this matter. Just as he was about to make his move, he suddenly sensed something. He turned his head towards the entrance of the valley and shouted, "How dare you!" By the time he finished speaking, he had already disappeared. Only a streak of light could be seen rushing towards the entrance of the valley. He had sensed the commotion caused by Lu Yi killing the black-clothed cultivator. Inside the thatched hut, the little fairy doctor raised her head and stared in the direction of the entrance of the valley. Her eyes flickered with a faint light. Although there were many obstacles, she seemed to be able to see the situation over there clearly. She sighed softly as if she could not hear it. At the entrance of the valley, the scene was a mess. With Lu Yi at the front and the many cultivators who came to seek medical treatment behind him, the Heavenly Gully sect cultivators were forced to retreat. They clearly had more people, but they could not block Lu Yi's attacks at all. Until a certain moment, Lu Yi raised his head and saw a streak of light rushing towards him from the direction of the Medicine Valley. Before the person arrived, he had already vented his monstrous anger. "How dare you kill a disciple of my Heavenly Gully sect? Even if you die 10,000 times, you won't be able to absolve yourself from the blame. Lee, be careful," he cried out in a low voice. She had already sensed the strength of this person. Just as she finished speaking, Hupo, who was originally crouching on her shoulder to help her take care of Yi Lioli, leaped up and landed on Lu Ye's shoulder. Hupo was like a cat whose fur was standing on end. He lowered his body slightly, his fur standing on end, and let out a low growl from his throat. Hupo would only act like this when he was facing a threat. In Lu Ye's field of vision, everything around him had disappeared, leaving only the stalwart figure rushing towards him. Strong, very strong. Lu Yi had encountered many Cloud River Realm 9th Order cultivators. Not to mention those on the Cloud River battlefield, he had killed 2 Cloud River Realm 9th Order cultivators in the Soaring Dragon Realm. One was Pang Wanhai of the Divine Will sect, and the other was Sun Chi of the Heavenly Gully sect. But even though they were all 9th Order cultivators, the feeling they gave him was completely different. In terms of strength alone, Sun Chi was undoubtedly stronger than Pang Wanhai, but this person was even stronger than Sun Chi. The special environment of the Soaring Dragon Realm created a gap in strength between these Cloud River Realm 9th Order cultivators who could not improve their cultivation. Since they could not improve their cultivation, they could only hone their fighting skills and consolidate their foundation. The Cloud River Realm 9th Order cultivators of the Soaring Dragon Realm had truly reached the limit of the Cloud River Realm. Therefore, even if their cultivation was the same, their strength was completely different. It was just like the gap between the 3 malignant tumors on the Spirit Stream battlefield and the ordinary 9th Order cultivators. It's the 9th Elder of Heaven Gorge sect, Wu Xie. Zhuang Bufan's voice rang in Lu Ye's ear. He is a sword cultivator. Brother Yi, be careful. Almost at the same time as Zhuang Bufan's voice rang out, an azure stream of light shot out from Wu Xie's hand. A sharp aura locked onto Lu Yi, and the sharp aura cut into Lu Ye's skin, causing him to feel pain. Sword cultivators had always been known for their murderous nature. They were also the most lethal of all cultivation forces. In a comparison of strength between cultivators of the same level, sword cultivators often suppressed all other cultivation forces. Not to mention, Wu Xie's cultivation was even higher than Lu Ye's. There was a flying sword in the cyan light, and all the sharpness and fierceness came from this flying sword. Even if they were not targeted by this flying sword, the cultivators who followed Lu Yi could not help but stop in their tracks. All of them felt a chill run down their spines, and in their panic, they felt as if the end of the world had come. When this sword appeared, everyone's hopes were dashed, and they suddenly felt as if there was no meaning in living anymore. Zhuang Bufan bit the tip of his tongue and forcibly broke free from his negative state. His heart was filled with shock. He had long heard that the top 10 elders of Heavenly Gully sect were all unparalleled in strength. Only after seeing them today did he realize that the rumors were not false. Just the flying sword of Wu Xie, who was ranked 9th, had already reached the level of severing the heart before severing the body. It was hard to imagine how powerful the elders ranked above him were. Zhuang Bufan looked at Lu Yi with a worried expression. He did not know what would happen to Lu Yi. However, the scene he saw shocked him. Facing such a sword, this brother Yi actually stomped his feet on the ground. Wherever he stood, the ground cracked, and a pair of deep footprints appeared on the ground. His entire body shot out like an arrow that had left a bow. Fiery red spirit power surged around his body, making it seem as if he was enveloped in flames. Wu Xie's sword intent did not affect him in the slightest. This was because Lu Ye's mind was strong enough. Intent was an ethereal, intangible thing that could not be seen or touched. It targeted the mind, so even if Lu Yi had never encountered such a killing move before, his mind was strong enough to resist the sword's intense influence on him. Wu Xie was stunned as he looked at Lu Yi, who had managed to counterattack. He had never seen such a 6th Order Cloud River Realm cultivator before and coldly snorted, "No wonder you dared to kill my Heaven Gorge sect's disciples, it turns out you have something to rely on." In his opinion, Lu Yi definitely had a powerful master guiding him from behind. Perhaps he came from a top sect, otherwise, how could a brat like him display such strength? If it were before, Wu Xie might not have killed Lu Yi if he had such thoughts. If he really provoked a top sect, his future days would not be easy. But now, how could he care about such things? The entire Heaven Gorge sect was about to stand on the opposite side of Dragon Soaring Realm. Sooner or later, they would be besieged by the three great tyrannical saber sects. What did it matter if he killed a little brat with unknown origins? With a single thought, Wu Xie summoned his 100 swords, and the cyan sword lights suddenly split into 100 sword lights. All of them covered Lu Ye's body. This scene shocked the cultivators below into silence. Zhuang Bufan's face also changed as he muttered, "It's over." In his opinion, it was impossible for Lu Yi to survive such a sword strike. However, immediately after, a figure charged out from the boundless swordlight. Lu Ye's clothes were in tatters as blood flew through the air. Wounds were visible to the naked eye, and his flesh was torn apart. A sword cultivator's murderous intent was terrifying, but the murderous intent of a ninth-order Cloud River Realm sword cultivator was even more terrifying. What was even more terrifying was the murderous intent of a ninth-order Cloud River Realm sword cultivator like Wu Xie. If he had not activated his spirit rune to protect his body, it would have been impossible for him to block that sword strike. His physique is so strong? Wu Xie was a little surprised. Others might not have seen what happened just now, but how could he not have seen it clearly? The strange spirit chi barrier that had suddenly appeared and the mysterious runes were clearly something that only a battle inscription master could display. If it was just this, it would have been fine, but the key was that this little brat's physique was too tyrannical. After his flying sword broke through his defensive means, it did not cause any fatal injuries. Lu Yi looked battered and exhausted at the moment, but in fact he had only suffered some superficial wounds. While Wu Xie was lost in thought, Lu Yi had already arrived in front of him. On his shoulder, Hoopa roared and an invisible impact spread out along with the sound waves, rushing straight into Wu Xie's mind. Wu Xie felt as if his head had been hit by a hammer, and he saw stars. Although he had only escaped in an instant, he had already seen a few sword lights. Anxiously, specks of saber light covered the area like a curtain of stars. Wu Xie's eyes narrowed as a great uneasiness rose in his heart. Only now did he realize that he had underestimated this young man. To be continued. Chapter 704. The blue light returned to Wu Xie's hand, and he seemed to have turned into an unsheathed sword. Saber light and sword light intertwined as the two figures clashed. Lu Ye's figure floated back a few dozen meters as blood splattered across the sky. On his shoulder, Hoopa looked awe-inspiring as their blood chi merged. On the other side, Wu Xie also floated back a few dozen meters. His black clothes were soon soaked with blood. He looked deeply at Lu Yi, as if he wanted to imprint Lu Ye's figure into the depths of his soul. Then he looked fiercely in the direction of the Medicine Valley's thatched hut and gritted his teeth. "Cheap slut, you're good?" After saying that, he turned around and left. It was one thing for such a powerful sixth-order Cloud River Realm cultivator to suddenly appear, but more importantly, he didn't know when he was poisoned. He hadn't noticed it before, but after fighting with Lu Yi, he realized that something was wrong with him. In this world, who else but the little fairy doctor would be able to poison him without anyone noticing? He thought about it, but he still couldn't figure out when he was poisoned. He was deeply shocked by the little fairy doctor's terrifying methods. Fortunately, this woman didn't kill, and the poison she gave him wasn't the kind that could take his life. Otherwise, he would be dead by now. He ran away? The group of cultivators below was dumbfounded, as if they were in a dream. When Wu Xie rushed out of the Medicine Valley, these cultivators who came to seek medical treatment thought that a great disaster was imminent. They dared to follow Lu Yi and break through the Heaven Canyon sect's defensive line because there were no decent masters in front of them, and Lu Yi was leading them. But in the face of a famous master like Wu Xie, they didn't have the courage to act rashly. They thought that Lu Yi was dead for sure and that they would be killed, but who knew that the situation would change like this? They didn't know that Wu Xie was poisoned, and only thought that Lu Yi had injured him and driven him away. For a moment, Lu Yi was shocked. The cultivators who came to seek medical treatment were shocked, but the defeated Heaven Canyon sect's cultivators were even more shocked. Seeing that their ninth elder had fled quickly, they didn't dare to stay and fled in all directions. No one chased after them, and soon, they were all gone. Only then did Lu Yi float down from the sky, a look of contemplation flashing across his eyes. Although he had been practicing the tyrant saber art all this time, strictly speaking, this was the second enemy he had used the tyrant saber art to deal with. Sure enough, the feeling of cultivating by himself was different from when he was facing an enemy. Activating the tyrant saber art in such a life and death battle allowed him to have a deeper understanding and comprehension of this saber art. It also greatly aided his cultivation of this saber art. The benefits were endless. Although he did not know that Wu Xie had left decisively because he had been poisoned, the words that Wu Xie had said before he left made him understand that the owner of the Medicine Valley must have done something to him that made him feel threatened. If they were to continue fighting, Lu Yi was not afraid. He might not be Wu Xie's match in a short period of time, but as long as he could hold on for a while, he was confident that he could defeat Wu Xie. No matter what, whether it was the power of the blood-stained spiritual tattoos or the beast transformation secret skill, they all needed to accumulate power before they could unleash their power slowly. Once the battle reached the point where he had to use his beast transformation secret technique, Wu Xie would die without a doubt. The heritage of this world's ninth order Cloud River Realm Masters was truly unimaginable. Lu Yi was only the ninth elder, so how strong were the people ranked above him? "Brother Yi, are you all right?" Zhuang Bufan asked with concern, mainly because Lu Ye's appearance was somewhat miserable, his clothes in tatters and his body covered in wounds. Lu Yi shook his head, just some minor injuries. Zhuang Bufan was full of admiration. Brother Yi is really fierce. Before, he had always thought that Lu Yi was a disciple from some top sect, but after seeing that shocking saber strike, he suddenly realized who he was. Wasn't this sixth Yi the sixth young lord of tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa? That fierce saber strike was undoubtedly the tyrant saber art. He had also heard about tyrannical Saber Mountain Villa, but he didn't know much about it. A 13 or 14-year-old medicine boy with rosy lips and white teeth floated out from the depths of the Medicine Valley, bowed, and said, "Senior brothers, my master invites you." Lu Yi returned the courtesy. "I was forced to break the Medicine Valley's rules. I hope master will forgive me." The medicine boy smiled and shook his head, looking as if he didn't care. The Heavenly Gorge sect had come aggressively and acted in such a domineering manner. These apprentice alchemists had long found them an eyesore. Unfortunately, they were too weak to change anything. Now that Lu Yi had helped them chase Wu Xie away and killed a group of Heavenly Gorge sect cultivators, the apprentice alchemists couldn't thank him enough. How could they care about the rules? "Fellow cultivator, please go first." Among the cultivators who came to seek medical treatment, someone gestured with his hand. The others also chimed in one after another. Strong cultivators were respected no matter where they were, and the dragon soaring realm was no exception. After witnessing the battle between Lu Yi and Wu Xie, who would look down on him because of his age and cultivation level. Moreover, without Lu Yi, these people would probably still be blocked at the entrance of the Medicine Valley, unable to enter. It was only natural for Lu Yi to go first. Lu Yi didn't refuse. He supported Zhuang Bufan, who was panting, and Ledi, who was carrying Yi Lioli, into the Medicine Valley. The others followed closely behind. Soon, the entrance of the Medicine Valley was empty, leaving only bloodstains and corpses on the ground, indicating the battle that had just taken place. Under the guidance of the medicine boy, the group quickly arrived in front of the straw hut in the center of the Medicine Valley. The medicine boy bowed, "Master, I've brought the person." Lu Yi cupped his fists and said in a clear voice, "Feng Province's Yi Lu, together with his sister Yi Lioli and friend Zhuang Bufan, requests the little fairy doctor to save him. It's a doctor's duty to treat illnesses and get rid of disasters. Little friend, you're too polite. Come in." A gentle voice came from inside the straw hut. The voice seemed to have a magical power that made people feel as if they were bathed in a spring breeze. Just listening to the voice made people feel light. Lu Yi and Yi were surprised at the same time. They looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Frowning slightly, Lu Yi said, "Sorry to disturb you." As he spoke, he walked in. The straw hut was not big, and it was filled with a variety of complex herbal smells. A plump figure immediately entered Lu Ye's eyes. The figure's back was facing Lu Ye, so he couldn't see her face. She was wearing a long green dress, and her black hair hung down to her waist. The woman seemed to be pounding the herbs, one stroke after another, meticulously. This woman was undoubtedly the owner of the Medicine Valley, the little fairy doctor. Lu Ye stared at her back, and Yi was also dumbfounded. After a long while, Yi turned to look at Lu Ye. Her mouth moved but no sound came out. But Lu Ye knew what she wanted to say and slowly shook his head. Immediately after, under the extremely shocked gaze of Zhuang Bufan, Lu Ye strode forward and stood in front of the fairy doctor, his gaze fixed on her face without blinking. Seeing her face, Lu Ye's pupils shrank, and his thumb subconsciously rubbed the Panshan blade at his waist. "Brother, what are you doing?" Zhuang Bufan shouted in his heart. If it wasn't for the fact that it was inconvenient for him to move, he would have rushed forward and pulled Lu Ye back. "We're here to seek medical treatment. How can we stare at someone's face in front of them? What a scandal!" In the entire Soaring Dragon realm, the little fairy doctor's connections and prestige were top-notch. No one dared to look down on her because she was a woman. Even if she was really as beautiful as a flower, we shouldn't be so rude. Moreover, he felt that Lu Ye was not the kind of person who liked women. He was anxious and couldn't help but cough violently. Being stared at such a close distance, the little fairy doctor couldn't help but frown. No one had ever dared to stare at her like this. She stopped pounding the herbs and looked at Lu Ye. She asked curiously, "Little friend, is there something on my face?" "Little friend." It was really strange to hear this form of address from the owner of this face. Lu Ye narrowed his eyes and said, "No, I just feel that you look a little familiar." It was more than familiar, it was simply too familiar. When they heard the little fairy doctor's voice, Lu Ye and Yi felt that it was a little inconceivable, because that voice was exactly the same as Hua Xi's voice. However, if they really wanted to compare, the little fairy doctor's voice had more of the vicissitudes of life. After entering the thatched hut and seeing the little fairy doctor's back, Lu Ye and Yi felt even more inconceivable. Because from the back, the two of them almost thought that the person standing here was Hua Xi. So even if Lu Ye felt that it was impossible, he couldn't help but want to verify it with his own eyes. He couldn't wait to walk in front of the little fairy doctor and stare at her. With this look, Lu Ye almost couldn't help but ask, "What are you doing here?" There was no other reason. The little fairy doctor's face was exactly the same as Hua Xi's. If he met such a woman in any other place in the Cloudy River battlefield, Lu Ye would definitely think that Hua Xi had advanced to the Cloudy River realm and come to the Cloudy River battlefield. But this was the Soaring Dragon realm's secret realm. He came in through the transportation array outside the 100 Formation Pagoda. In the entire Cloudy River battlefield, other than him, no one else had the ability to repair that transportation array. So it was impossible for Hua Xi to come in. There was no reaction from the battlefield imprint. One had to know that whether it was him, Hua Xi or Yi, they were all disciples of the Jade Blood Sect. They all had the battlefield imprint that belonged to the Jade Blood Sect. If they were from the same sect, when they were close enough, they would be able to sense each other. Back then, his eldest apprentice Sister Wei Yang had brazenly charged into the Spirit Stream battlefield with a cultivation base at the True Lake realm. Even though Lu Ye had never seen her before, nor had he ever heard of her before, his battlefield imprint had told him that she was one of his own. The woman in front of him, whose figure, voice and appearance were exactly the same as Hua Xi, didn't have a battlefield imprint. This meant that she wasn't Hua Xi. Of course, the most important point was that this woman was more mature than Hua Xi. In terms of age, Hua Xi was actually not that old. Lu Ye estimated that she was at most 1 or 2 years older than him. It was just that Hua Xi's aura leaned towards the mature and plump type. And the little fairy doctor in front of him was the kind of woman who was thoroughly mature. She looked like a more mature Hua Xi, and there was not a single part of her body that did not exude an astonishing charm. To be continued, but you're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.